While I was fighting for my life in the hospital, my husband Tony emptied our joint accounts and maxed out our credit cards. He texted, "Taking care of our finances during your recovery." What he didn't know was that I had built a secret fortune over the years. When I was discharged, I didn't go home. I went straight to my lawyer with evidence of his deception spanning a decade. By the time he realized what happened, I was living in my dream home while he faced bankruptcy and fraud charges. The antiseptic smell of the hospital room burned my nostrils, a constant reminder that I was trapped in this sterile prison. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rhythmic beeping of monitors tracked my heartbeat, steady now after the emergency surgery that had saved my life. 3 days ago, I had been rushing to an important meeting when severe abdominal pain sent me crashing to my knees in our company's parking garage. If Tracy hadn't found me there, the doctor said I might not have survived the internal bleeding from what turned out to be a ruptured ovarian cyst, complicated by previously undiagnosed endometriosis. I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny holes in each acoustic tile to distract myself from the pain that medication couldn't fully mask. 12 years of marriage to Tony, and this was the first major health crisis I'd faced. We'd always been the power couple, me running my interior design consultancy, him heading the regional office of a national investment firm. Our Christmas cards showed a perfect life, exotic vacations, charity galas, and the beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Westlake Heights that we'd purchased just before our 10th anniversary. My phone buzzed on the side table, and I winced as I reached for it, the movement pulling at my stitches. Tony's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," I answered, relief washing over me. He'd been strangely absent since my surgery, stopping by only once with flowers and a distracted kiss on my forehead before saying he needed to handle some work crisis. I'd been trying not to read into it, telling myself that someone needed to keep things running while I was laid up. "Olivia, how are you feeling today?" His voice sounded distant, the background noise suggesting he was in his car. "Better, I think. The doctor says I'll need at least 4 more days here, then several weeks of recovery at home." I paused, waiting for him to offer reassurance. "The pain is still pretty bad." "That's good," he said, clearly not listening. "Listen, I'm taking care of our finances during your recovery. Just transferred some funds around to cover your medical expenses. Don't worry about anything, okay?" Something in his tone made my stomach tighten in a way that had nothing to do with my surgery. After 15 years together, we'd dated 3. Years before marrying, I could read the nuances in Tony's voice like a familiar book. This wasn't his normal confident tone. There was something evasive in it. "What do you mean, transferred some funds around? From which accounts?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual even as an unsettling feeling crept up my spine. "Just handling things, Liv. You focus on getting better." He cleared his throat. "I'm heading into a meeting now. I'll try to swing by tomorrow, but we've got that situation with the Miller portfolio, and you know how it is." The call ended before I could respond, leaving me staring at the phone in confusion. The Miller portfolio? Tony had closed that deal weeks ago. He'd taken me to Costello's, that ridiculously expensive Italian restaurant downtown, to celebrate. Something wasn't adding up. I opened our joint banking app, something I admittedly hadn't checked in weeks. Between running my business and preparing for the Anderson project, a complete renovation of a historic property that could put my firm on the national map, I'd left the day-to-day financial management to Tony. It was our arrangement. He handled our personal finances with his expertise, while I focused on growing my business. The app loaded and my breath caught. Our main checking account, which typically held at least $12,000 as a buffer, showed a balance of $427.38. I frantically tapped over to savings, where we kept our emergency fund. The $50,000 that was supposed to be there had dwindled to just under $3,000. My fingers trembled as I checked our joint investment account. The balance there had plummeted by over 60% from the last time I'd checked. In total, nearly $180,000 had vanished from our joint accounts. The pain in my abdomen flared as my breathing quickened. I reached for the call button, then stopped myself. What would I tell the nurse? My husband appears to be emptying our accounts while I'm hospitalized? I needed to think clearly, to understand what was happening before I reacted. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe Tony had moved the money to a different account for tax purposes or to make an investment opportunity. That would be like him, making financial moves without fully explaining them until after the fact, when he could present it as a brilliant decision that had already paid off. But deep down, in that intuitive place that wives develop about their husbands, I knew something was very wrong. I opened my contacts and called Tracy, my business partner, and closest friend since college. If anyone could help me think through this rationally, it was her. "Hey, warrior woman," she answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "I was just about to call you. How are you feeling? Physically or emotionally?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked on the last word. There was a pause. "Olivia, what's wrong? Can you do me a favor?" A weird one. I took a deep breath. "Can you drive by my house and just see if Tony's car is there? And maybe check if there's anything unusual?" Another pause, longer this time. "Unusual like, what exactly?" "I don't know, just anything that seems off." I hesitated. "Don't let him see you if he's there." "Liv, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I explained about the phone call and the missing money, trying to sound calmer than I felt. Tracy didn't interrupt, but I could almost hear her frowning through the phone. "I'll go right now," she said finally. "And I'm bringing you a decent coffee. On my way back to the hospital because that conversation deserves better than whatever brown water they're serving you there." After we hung up, I leaned back against the pillows, my mind racing. Was I overreacting? Tony and I had built a life together. We had shared dreams, a beautiful home, friends who envied our relationship. Would he really betray me while I was at my most vulnerable? A memory surfaced. 3 years ago, finding a receipt for a women's bracelet from Tiffany in Tony's suit pocket while doing laundry. It had been 2 weeks before my birthday, so I'd feigned ignorance, expecting the iconic blue box on the day. It never came. When I finally asked about it casually, he'd laughed it off. A gift for his assistant for Administrative Professionals Day, he'd said. I'd believed him, or convinced myself I did. Now, I wasn't so sure. The monitor beside me beeped faster, matching my rising anxiety. A nurse popped her head in, concern on her face. "Your heart rate's elevated, Mrs. Reynolds. Are you in pain?" I forced a smile. "Just uncomfortable. Could I have some water, please?" As she left to fetch it, I tried to calm myself. There was something Tony didn't know, something that might prove to be my saving grace in this moment of uncertainty. Behind my carefully cultivated image as one half of a power couple, I had always maintained a private safety net. It had started 8 years ago, after my mother passed away. Unlike the dramatic inheritance in novels, Mom hadn't left me millions. What she had left me was the small life insurance policy from my father's death when I was a child, which she'd never touched, allowing it to grow modestly. It wasn't a fortune by any means, just under $95,000. But Mom had been explicit in her final weeks. "Keep something for yourself, Livy. Every woman needs her own security." Taking her advice to heart, I had opened a private account at a different bank than the one Tony and I used. Over the years, I'd gradually added to it, a small percentage from each design project, the occasional cash payment from clients who preferred that method, the commission from referring friends to my financial advisor. I never spent from this account, instead watching with quiet satisfaction as it grew. 3 years ago, when Amelia Johnston, an elderly client whose home I'd redesigned, passed away, she'd stunned me by leaving me her collection of mid-century, modern furniture and art, pieces I'd admired during our consultations. Rather than keeping them, I'd sold the collection through a high-end auction house for a surprising sum, all of which went into my private account. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The nurse returned with water, checking my IV line as I sipped slowly. "Try to rest, Mrs. Reynolds. Your body needs to heal." Rest seemed impossible now, but I nodded anyway. As she left, my phone buzzed with a text from Tracy. "Outside your house now. Tony's car isn't here, but there's a black Audi in the driveway I don't recognize. Lights on inside. Want me to knock?" My heart raced again. An unknown car at our house? I typed back quickly, "No, don't knock. Can you see anything through the windows?" Minutes passed like hours until her reply came. "Went around back, looking through patio doors. There's a woman in your living room, blonde, packing things into boxes." The room seemed to tilt around me as I stared at the message. A woman in my house packing things while I lay in a hospital bed? The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was complete. I closed my eyes, fighting back the nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. When I opened them again, I knew exactly what I needed to do. With trembling fingers, I typed a response to Tracy. "I need you to go to my office. In the bottom right drawer of my desk, there's a blue leather portfolio with my mother's initials, ERG, embossed on it. Bring it to me. Don't tell anyone what's happening yet." Inside that portfolio were the statements for my private account, my hidden fortune that had grown to just over $387,000 over the years, along with documents Tony knew nothing about. Documents that would prove to be my lifeline in the storm that was clearly coming. As I waited for Tracy's confirmation, I thought about Tony's parting words on our phone call. He was taking care of our finances during my recovery. What he didn't know was that I had been taking care of myself all along. The ceiling tiles blurred as I stared upward, trying to make sense of what Tracy had just told me. A strange woman in my house packing things into boxes, the image burned in my mind, setting off alarms I'd been ignoring for months, maybe years. The monitor beside me beeped faster again, matching my racing heart. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe deeply. Panic wouldn't help me now. I needed clarity, needed to understand the full scope of what was happening before I made any moves. My phone buzzed with another message from Tracy. "Got the portfolio, on my way to you now, stayed out of sight. The woman is still there and I think I saw her wearing your anniversary bracelet." The diamond one. The diamond tennis bracelet Tony had given me for our 10th anniversary. A stunning piece worth nearly $12,000 that I wore only on special occasions. I kept it in my jewelry box in our bedroom closet. This wasn't just someone helping Tony pack. This was a woman comfortable enough to go through my personal belongings and claim them as her own. I thought back over the past year, searching for signs I'd missed. The late nights at the office that had become more frequent. The business trips. That seemed to multiply. The distracted way he sometimes looked at me during conversations, as if I were a puzzle he was trying to solve. Or perhaps a problem he was trying to escape. 6 months ago, I'd found an unfamiliar perfume on one of his shirts. When I'd mentioned it, he'd explained that his new client, Cindy Wallace, had hugged him after he'd secured her a substantial investment return. I'd believed him because I'd wanted to, because the alternative was too painful to consider. Now, I wondered if Cindy Wallace was the blonde woman in my living room, wearing my bracelet and packing my things. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts, and Dr. Marshall entered, chart in hand. "Mrs. Reynolds, how are we feeling today?" Her kind eyes scanned my vitals on the monitor, a slight frown forming. "Your blood pressure is elevated. Are you experiencing more pain?" "Just stressed," I managed, attempting a smile. "Work concerns, raised an eyebrow. "Your body needs all its energy for healing right now. Whatever work concerns you have can wait." She checked my surgical site, her touch professional and gentle. "The incision is healing nicely. but I'm concerned about your stress levels. Is there someone who can help manage these work issues for you? The irony wasn't lost on me. The person who should have been supporting me was actively betraying me. My business partner is handling things, I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. Dr. Marshall nodded, making a note in my chart. I'd like to keep you here at least until Friday. The complications from surgery were significant, and I want to make sure you're stable before sending you home. Home. The word echoed hollowly in my chest. What home would I be returning to, Your husband planning to visit today? I'd like to discuss your care plan with both of you. He's tied up with work, I replied, the lie bitter on my tongue. But I can relay the information. After the doctor left, I pulled up our credit card apps on my phone. The American Express card showed recent charges at Barton's Jewelers, $4,700. Delta Airlines, 2 first-class tickets to Aruba for next month, nearly $6,000. And multiple charges at high-end restaurants I'd never been to. Our Visa card was nearly maxed out with furniture purchases from stores I didn't recognize, and a charge for $3,200 at a place called Executive Storage Solutions. He wasn't just taking our money, he was actively spending it, preparing for a life that didn't include me. The realization hit me with physical force, and I had to swallow hard against a wave of nausea. Tracy arrived 30 minutes later, her face flushed from rushing. She set a coffee on my side table and immediately took my hand, her expression a mixture of concern and barely contained fury. That woman is still there, she said without preamble. And when I was leaving, a moving truck pulled up. A small one, but still. I squeezed her hand, grateful for her presence. Did you bring it? She nodded, pulling the blue leather portfolio from her bag and placing it on my lap. Liv, what's going on? I've never seen this before. I opened the portfolio, revealing the neatly organized bank statements, investment summaries, and legal documents inside. My insurance policy, I said quietly. Tracy's eyes widened as she scanned the most recent statement, showing a balance of $387,462.09. Olivia Reynolds, she whispered. You've been holding out on me. I explained about my mother's advice, the initial inheritance, and how I'd built it over the years. I never thought I'd need it, I admitted. It was just security, peace of mind. And now it's your lifeline, Tracy said, understanding immediately. She pulled out her tablet and placed it on the adjustable table over my bed. Let's see what else that husband of yours has been up to. Having worked closely together for years, Tracy and I had access to each other's email accounts, a practical arrangement for our business. Now she logged into my personal email, which I rarely checked since most people contacted me through my phone. There, she said, pointing to an email from our bank dated 3 days ago, the day of my surgery. Account alert, change of contact information. She opened it, revealing that the email address and phone number associated with our joint accounts had been changed. He did this while I was in surgery, I said, the betrayal cutting deeper. He literally waited until I was unconscious. Tracy continued scrolling through my emails. And here, email confirmations for wire transfers from your joint investment account, 3 of them, all to an account I don't recognize at Northern Trust. That's not an account we share, I confirmed, a cold clarity beginning to replace the shock. He's been planning this for a while. She nodded grimly. There's more. Confirmation of address change for your Amex card. The new address is... She tapped quickly, searching public records. A luxury apartment building downtown, The Archer. Units at The Archer started at $4,000 a month. Tony had been setting up a new life, systematically and methodically, while I focused on growing my business and maintaining our home. I need to call Paul, I said decisively. Tracy raised an eyebrow. Your divorce attorney brother-in-law? The one Tony plays golf with every month? The very same, I confirmed. Though I suspect those golf games have been covers for something else entirely. Tracy handed me my phone, her expression hardening. Do it. And Liv? No mercy. I dialed Paul's number, relieved when he answered on the second ring. Paul, it's Olivia. I need your help, and I need absolute confidentiality, even from Jeremy. Jeremy was my brother, Paul's husband, and while I loved him dearly, he had never been able to keep a secret. Olivia? I heard you were in the hospital. Are you okay? Paul's voice was concerned, professional. Physically, I'm recovering. But I've discovered something. I paused, the reality still difficult to articulate. Tony's emptying our accounts and appears to be moving out, or moving someone in, while I'm hospitalized. There was a long silence before Paul spoke, his tone shifting from family friend to attorney. Tell me everything. For the next 15 minutes, I laid out what I knew. The drained accounts, the credit card charges, the woman in my house, the changed contact information. Paul listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification. I need to protect myself, I concluded. And I have resources he doesn't know about. Do not tell Tony you know anything, Paul advised immediately. Let him think you're in the dark. I'll come to the hospital this evening with paperwork for you to sign. We need to move quickly to secure your separate assets and document the timing of his actions. After the call ended, Tracy squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Liv. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. The initial shock was giving way to something else, determination perhaps, or a crystalline anger that felt almost clarifying. I need you to do something else for me, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. In my home office, the external hard drive in my desk contains backups of all our financial records for tax purposes. I need it, Tracy hesitated. The moving truck is there now. I don't know if I can get in without being seen. Use the back gate. The code is 6294. You can enter through the sunroom. I always keep the spare key under the blue pot with the orchid. I paused, considering. And Tracy, take pictures of anything that seems relevant, especially who's there and what they're taking. She nodded, determination replacing concern. I'll go now before they clear everything out. After she left, I lay back, exhaustion washing over me. The surgical pain seemed distant now, overshadowed by the emotional wound that was still unfolding. I thought about calling Tony, confronting him directly, demanding answers, but Paul's advice rang in my ears. Better to let him think I remained oblivious while I gathered information and protected myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Hope you're resting well. Meeting running late tonight, probably won't make visiting. Hours. Need anything? The casual cruelty of it, the pretense of concern while he dismantled our life, made my blood boil. With effort, I typed back. Just tired. The doctors say I'll be here through Friday at least. His response came quickly. That's probably best. Take all the time you need to recover fully. Of course, he wanted me to stay in the hospital as long as possible. It gave him more time to complete whatever exit strategy he was executing. I set the phone down, unwilling to maintain the charade any longer than necessary. A nurse entered with medication, concern evident as she noted my expression. Rough day? I accepted the pills with a tight smile. You could say that. Your friend who was just here? She left this for you. The nurse handed me a small notepad and pen. Said you might want to make some notes while you remembered things. Tracy, always thinking ahead. I thanked the nurse and, once alone, began to list everything I could remember about our financial arrangements. The mortgage on our home was in both our names, as were most of our major assets. My business was separate, thankfully, registered solely in my name with its own accounts and credit lines. The house in Cape Cod that we'd purchased as a vacation. Property 2 years ago was also in both our names, though Tony had insisted on handling all the paperwork. I paused, a memory surfacing. When we'd closed on the Cape House, Tony had been peculiarly insistent that I didn't need to attend the closing. He'd claimed it was because I was in the middle of a major project, but I'd ended up rearranging my schedule and going anyway. The closing attorney had seemed confused when I'd arrived, mentioning paperwork that had been adjusted this morning. Tony had quickly stepped in, explaining it away as a miscommunication about the insurance rider. Had he been planning, even then, to create an escape route? Had our entire marriage been a calculation on his part? My phone buzzed again. Tracy this time. Got the hard drive. Getting out now. Woman is definitely wearing your clothes. Man there too, not Tony. Tall, gray hair. They're inventorying the artwork. Taking photos. The artwork. My stomach dropped. Some of the pieces in our home were from my personal collection, items I'd purchased before our marriage or inherited from my mother. The thought of them being cataloged and removed like common property made the betrayal cut even deeper. When Tracy returned 40 minutes later, her expression told me everything before she even spoke. "It's worse than we thought," she said, setting the external hard drive on my bedside table. "The woman, she's not just some girlfriend. I overheard them talking. Her name is Cindy, and from what I could gather, they're married." Married? The word hung in the air between us. Impossible, and yet somehow not entirely surprising. "That's not possible. We've been married for 12 years. Tracy sat beside my hospital bed, her face etched with concern. "I know how it sounds, but I heard it clearly. The man, the older one with gray hair, he called her Mrs. Reynolds when they were discussing which paintings to take." "There must be some explanation," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew I was grasping at straws. "Maybe she's a relative I don't know about. A cousin or Liv." Tracy's voice was gentle but firm. "She was wearing your anniversary bracelet and your clothes. And she was directing the movers about which furniture to take as if she owned the place." She hesitated. "And there's something else. I took pictures, like you asked." She pulled out her phone, swiping to the gallery, before handing it to me. The first image showed a blonde woman, slender, perhaps in her early 30s, standing in my living room, pointing at my grandmother's antique secretary desk. She was indeed wearing my bracelet, the diamonds catching the light. The next photo showed her with an older man, gray-haired and distinguished in an expensive suit, examining what appeared to be a document. But it was the third photo that made my breath catch. There, visible on the coffee table, was a framed photograph I'd never seen before. Tony and the blonde woman, dressed formally, his arm around her waist as they smiled for the camera. It looked like a wedding photo. "This doesn't make any sense," I whispered, zooming in on the image. "How could he be married to two people? That's bigamy. It's illegal." Tracy took back the phone, her expression grim. "I don't know what's going on exactly, but I took photos of some documents they had spread out on the dining table." She swiped to another image. "Look at this. It was a property deed for our house in Cape Cod, but the names listed as owners weren't Tony and Olivia Reynolds. They were Tony and Cindy Reynolds." "This can't be real," I said, the room beginning to spin around me. "We bought that house together. My name is on the deed." "Is it?" Tracy asked quietly. "Did you ever actually see the final deed after closing?" I tried to remember. Tony had handled most of the paperwork, claiming it made sense since he worked in finance. I'd signed documents at the closing, but afterward, I'd been rushing to a client meeting and left Tony to finish up. He'd said he'd file everything properly. "I trusted him," I said, the words hollow in my throat. "I know you did." Tracy's eyes softened with sympathy. "But I think we need to consider the possibility that Tony has been living a double life, and perhaps has been for longer than we realize." I closed my eyes, memories flooding back, subtle discrepancies and excuses that I dismissed over the years. The Christmas when he'd claimed to be stuck in Chicago due to a snowstorm, despite clear weather reports. The frequent work trips that seemed to fall on weekends or holidays. The way he'd discouraged me from dropping by his office, claiming the security procedures were too cumbersome for casual visits. "I'm such a fool," I whispered. "No." Tracy's voice was fierce. "You're a victim of fraud and deception. There's a difference." Paul arrived just after 7, a leather briefcase in hand and a determined set to his jaw. He greeted Tracy with a eye nod before turning to me. "I've started gathering information," he said without preamble. "The situation is unusual." He glanced at Tracy. "What have you told her?" "Everything I saw," Tracy replied, "including the possibility that Tony has another wife." Paul's expression remained carefully neutral as he pulled out his tablet. "I've done some preliminary searching of public records. There are some irregularities I'm still trying to untangle." He looked at me directly. "Olivia, I need you to brace yourself. This goes beyond finances." He turned the tablet to show me a marriage certificate, dated 4 years ago, between Anthony Reynolds and Cynthia Wallace. My husband and another woman, legally married in the state of Vermont. "That's not possible," I said automatically. "We were already married." "Yes, you were," Paul confirmed, "which makes this document either fraudulent or evidence of a crime." "Bigamy," I said numbly. "Potentially," Paul nodded. "But there's more." He swiped to another document. "This is from the county assessor's office regarding your Cape Cod property. According to their records, it's owned by Anthony and Cynthia Reynolds. Your name doesn't appear on the deed at all." The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. He must have altered the documents somehow. I was at the closing. I signed papers. "What exactly did you sign?" Paul asked. "Do you remember?" I tried to recall the details of that day 2 years ago. There had been so many documents, and I'd been distracted, rushing to finish so I could get to an important client meeting. I thought I was signing the final deed, but I paused, a memory surfacing. Tony handled most of it. He said it was easier since he understood the financial jargon better than I did. Paul's expression darkened. "He may have had you sign preliminary documents or even decoys, then submitted different paperwork afterward." "Is that even possible?" Tracy asked. "Unfortunately, yes," Paul confirmed. "Especially if he had connections at the title company, or if he submitted amended documents later claiming there had been an error." The enormity of the deception was beginning to sink in. This wasn't just about money. It was about years of calculated lies. A double life maintained with meticulous attention to detail. "I don't understand," I said, my voice small. "Why not just divorce me if he wanted to be with someone else?" Paul exchanged a glance with Tracy. "That's what we need to figure out. There could be financial motives, professional ones, or something else entirely." I thought about Tony's career. At the investment firm, his carefully cultivated image as a family man with a successful wife. Would a divorce have threatened that image? Or was there something more sinister at play? "The Cindy woman," I said slowly. "Tracy, you said she was younger?" Tracy nodded. "Early 30s, I'd guess. Very polished. And the older man with gray hair. Did you hear his name?" "No, but they seemed familiar. Comfortable with each other. He called her darling at one point. A new, disturbing possibility formed in my mind. What if she's not just Tony's secret wife? What if she's connected? To his business somehow?" Paul's expression sharpened. "That's a possibility worth exploring. Do you have access to any of his work documents or emails?" I shook my head. Tony's always been very protective of his work information. Separate email, password-protected files. I paused, a thought occurring to me. "But we filed our taxes jointly. I have copies of those on that hard drive Tracy brought." Paul took the external hard drive, his expression thoughtful. "This could give us some insight. Tax returns might reveal income sources or deductions that point to additional properties or business interests. What should I do in the meantime? I asked. Tony thinks I'm completely in the dark. He barely visits, and when he does, it's brief. He doesn't know I've discovered anything. Keep it that way, Paul advised firmly. For now, your best protection is his assumption that you're oblivious. It gives us time to investigate and secure your position before confronting him. I nodded, though the thought of pretending everything was normal made my skin crawl. And what about when I'm discharged? I'm supposed to go home in a few days. You're not going back to that house, Tracy said immediately. You'll stay with me. Actually, Paul interjected, it might be better if Olivia checks into a hotel under a different name. Somewhere Tony wouldn't think to look. If he realizes she's not coming home as expected, it might accelerate whatever he's planning. The reality of my situation hit me anew. I was planning to hide from my husband, the man I'd shared my life with for 15 years, the man who, it seemed, had been systematically deceiving me for years. How could I have missed this? I asked, more to myself than to them. How could I not have known? Tracy took my hand. Because you trusted him. Because that's what normal people do in marriages. They trust. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have seen the signs, should have questioned more, investigated more. Part of me still wanted to believe there was an explanation, some complex misunderstanding that would make sense of it all. What if we're wrong? I asked. What if there's a reason for all of this that we're not seeing? Paul sighed, his expression softening slightly. Olivia, I understand the impulse to find an innocent explanation, but the evidence is pointing in a very specific direction. The accounts being emptied, the woman in your house, the Cape Cod property in her name, the marriage certificate. These aren't coincidences. Deep down, I knew he was right. Yet a small, irrational part of me still wanted to believe in the man I thought I'd married. The man who had held my hand through my mother's funeral, who had celebrated each of my business successes as if they were his own, who had once written me a love letter for each day he was away on a 2-week business trip. Had that all been a performance? A calculated effort to maintain a useful facade? I need to see more proof, I said finally, before I can fully accept this. Tracy and Paul exchanged glances again. That's understandable, Paul said, and we will gather more evidence. But, Olivia, I need you to protect yourself in the meantime. That means securing your separate assets and preparing for the worst while we investigate further. I nodded, the practical part of my brain reasserting control. What do I need to sign? For the next hour, Paul walked me through a series of documents, paperwork to secure my separate account and business assets, temporary powers of attorney giving Tracy and Paul authority to act on my behalf if needed, and preliminary divorce. Filings that could be submitted if and when I made that decision. As I signed each paper, a curious calm settled over me. The initial shock and denial were giving way to something else, a determination to understand the full scope of Tony's deception and to protect what was rightfully mine. There's one more thing, Paul said as he gathered the signed documents. While you're still in the hospital, I suggest you request a complete credit report. If Tony has been living a double life for years, there may be financial entanglements we haven't discovered yet. The thought sent a chill through me. How deep did this deception go? What else didn't I know about the man I'd been married to for 12 years? After Paul left, Tracy stayed, her presence a silent comfort as I tried to process everything. The hospital room felt like a strange liminal space, suspended between the life I thought I had and whatever uncertain future awaited. Me, do you want me to stay tonight? Tracy asked softly. I shook my head. No, I need some time to think. I paused, gratitude momentarily overriding the turmoil. But thank you for everything. After she left, I lay in the darkness, the rhythmic beeping of monitors the only sound. Outside my window, the city glowed, millions of lives continuing as normal while mine had been shattered. I thought of Tony, wondered what he was doing at that moment. Was he with her? With Cindy? Were they planning their next steps, confident that I remained ignorant in my hospital bed? My phone buzzed on the side table, a text from Tony. Sorry. I couldn't make it today. How are you feeling? I stared at the message, the casual concern so at odds with what I now knew. With careful deliberation, I typed back, better. Doctors say I'm recovering well. His response came quickly. Great news. Try to rest. Love you. Love you. The words that had once brought comfort now felt like another weapon in his arsenal of deception. I set the phone down without replying, turning to look out the window at the night sky. Part of me still wanted to believe there was an explanation, some reason that would make sense of all of this. But as I watched the stars, distant and cold, above the city lights, I knew I was only delaying the inevitable. The truth was already laid out before me. I simply needed the courage to accept it fully. Tomorrow, I would stop hoping for an alternate explanation. Tomorrow, I would begin planning my response to Tony's betrayal. But tonight, just for a few more hours, I would allow myself to mourn. Not just for the marriage I had lost, but for the life I had believed in, the future I had planned, and the man I had thought I knew. Morning arrived with the sterile routine of hospital life. Vital checks, medication, a bland breakfast I barely touched. The night nurse who'd grown familiar with me over my stay frowned at my untouched tray. You need to eat to heal, Mrs. Reynolds, she said, concern evident in her voice. Mrs. Reynolds. The title that I'd worn proudly for 12 years now felt like a strange costume. Who was Mrs. Reynolds? Which one of us could rightfully claim that name? I'll try, I promised, forcing a small smile that didn't reach my eyes. After she left, I pulled out my laptop. Tracy had brought it from my office the previous day, and began the process of requesting my complete credit report. As the secure site loaded, my phone buzzed with a text from Paul. Reviewed tax returns from hard drive, found some concerning items. Coming by at 11. I turned my attention back to the credit report, scanning through the familiar accounts, our mortgage, the joint credit cards I already knew about, my business line of credit. Nothing seemed out of place until I reached a section titled Additional Accounts on Which You Are Listed. There, in plain text, was a mortgage for a property in Martha's Vineyard with a remaining balance of $1.2 million. I had never been to Martha's Vineyard, much less purchased property there. Listed as co-borrowers, Anthony Reynolds and Olivia Reynolds. My signature had been forged. I continued scrolling, a cold dread settling in my stomach. A business loan for $250,000 for an entity called TR Ventures LLC. A line of credit for $100,000, opened 6 months ago. A personal loan for $75,000 from last year, all with my name attached. All completely unknown to me. I was still staring at the screen when Tracy arrived, coffee in hand and determination in her stride. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, setting the coffee beside me. Worse, I replied, turning the laptop toward her. I've seen my financial future being destroyed. Tracy scanned the report, her expression darkening. He forged your signature? On all of these? Apparently. I took a steadying breath. And that's just what shows up on a credit report. Who knows? What else is out there? Tracy pulled a chair closer, her voice dropping to ensure privacy. Jeremy called me this morning. He's worried about Paul working on this case. Said Paul came home last night and was up half the night making calls. I felt a stab of guilt. I never meant to put Paul in an awkward position. That's not it, Tracy assured me. Jeremy's worried. About you. Paul told him enough for him to understand the severity, and he wants to help. He's good with financial investigations. It's what he does at the DA's office, remember? Jeremy, my younger brother, worked as a financial investigator for the district attorney. His specialty was uncovering complex fraud schemes and financial crimes. Do you think we should bring him in officially? I asked. Tracy nodded firmly. Absolutely. This isn't just divorce territory anymore, Liv. This is potential criminal fraud. Multiple counts of it. The idea that my situation might involve criminal charges was surreal, but the evidence was becoming harder to deny. I nodded slowly. Okay. Ask Jeremy to come with Paul today. While waiting for them to arrive, I forced myself to eat a few bites of the now cold breakfast, knowing I needed strength for whatever was coming. My phone periodically buzzed with texts from Tony, casual, concerned messages that maintained the fiction that everything was normal. Thinking of you today. Meeting rescheduled, so I'll try to stop by this afternoon. Need anything? Each message turned my stomach, but I responded with the same pretense of normalcy. Just resting. Don't worry about visiting if you're busy. Paul and Jeremy arrived precisely at 11, both dressed in suits that suggested they'd come from their respective offices. Jeremy embraced me carefully, mindful of my surgical incisions, his expression a mixture of concern and barely contained anger. "You look better than I expected," he said, studying my face. "Hospital lighting is forgiving," I replied with a weak smile. Paul pulled out his tablet, all business. "We should get started. There's a lot to cover." Jeremy nodded, setting his briefcase on the adjustable table. "Before we begin, Liv, I want you to know that this conversation falls under attorney-client privilege since I'm here as a consultant to Paul. But if we discover evidence of criminal activity, we may need to discuss reporting options." The formal language was so unlike my usually relaxed brother that it drove home the seriousness of the situation. I nodded, bracing myself. "I've found several concerning items in your tax returns," Paul began. "For the past 4 years, there have been deductions for mortgage interest on properties that aren't your primary residence or the Cape Cod house." "The Martha's Vineyard property," I said, turning my laptop to show them the credit report. "That's one," Paul confirmed. "But there's also a property in Aspen listed on your returns from 2 years ago." Jeremy leaned forward. "I did some preliminary searching based on what Paul shared last night. The Martha's Vineyard property was purchased 3 years ago for $2.1 million. The deed lists Anthony and Olivia Reynolds as owners. But I never signed anything for that property," I insisted. "Exactly," Jeremy nodded grimly. "The signature on the deed doesn't match your known signatures. I've already compared it to several documents Paul provided. The implication was clear. Tony had not only forged my signature, but had done so on multiple high-value transactions." "What about the Aspen property?" I asked. Paul swiped on his tablet. "Purchased 4 years ago for $1.8 million. But the ownership structure is different. It's held by TR Ventures LLC, which appears on your credit report." I requested the formation documents for TR Ventures LLC from the Secretary of State, Jeremy added. "It was formed 5 years ago with 2 members, Anthony Reynolds and Cynthia Wallace." The name struck me like a physical blow. Cynthia Wallace, the woman Tony had allegedly married, the woman who had been in my house wearing my bracelet. "So, they've been involved for at least 5 years, I said quietly, the timeline forcing me to reevaluate even more of my marriage. "It appears so," Paul confirmed. "And based on the financial records, they've been actively acquiring property and taking on debt in your name for most of that time." Tracy, who had been silently observing, spoke up. "But why? Tony makes good money, and from what Liv has told me, this Cindy person comes from wealth. Why forge Olivia's signature and put her on these loans?" Jeremy and Paul exchanged glances, and it was Jeremy who answered. "We have a theory about that," he said carefully. "Based on what we've found so far, it appears that Tony may be involved in a form of mortgage fraud." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Paul explained, "that he's potentially been using your strong credit history and income to secure larger loans than he could qualify for alone, possibly with the intention of defaulting once he's extracted enough equity or cash." The room seemed to tilt slightly as the implications sank in. So he's not just stealing from me. He's setting me up to take the fall for a massive fraud scheme? Jeremy reached for my hand, his grip reassuring. That's what the evidence suggests. But we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. Paul pulled another document from his briefcase, his expression grave. There's something else you need to see, Olivia. He placed a folder on the adjustable table across my hospital bed. Inside was a copy of a life insurance policy, one I had never seen before, showing me as the insured party with a death benefit of $5 million. The beneficiary was listed as Anthony Reynolds. When was this taken out? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. 3 months ago, Paul replied quietly. The signature on the application doesn't match your authentic signature. It's another forgery. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. He took out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge? Jeremy nodded grimly, and increased it substantially just before your hospitalization. The words hung in the air, too terrible to fully comprehend. What had initially seemed like financial betrayal was revealing itself to be something much darker, much more sinister. Are you suggesting— I couldn't finish the sentence. We're not jumping to conclusions, Paul said carefully. But given the timing and everything else we've discovered, we need to consider all possibilities. Tracy's face had gone pale. The ruptured cyst. The doctors said it was a medical emergency. That happened naturally, right? I nodded slowly. That's what they told me, but— My mind raced back to the evening before my collapse. Tony had made dinner, something he rarely did, a spicy pasta dish that had left me feeling strangely unwell. I'd attributed the discomfort to the heavy cream sauce, but now— I need to speak with Dr. Marshall, I said suddenly. I want to know exactly what caused the rupture. Jeremy was already on his phone, stepping outside the room to make a call. Tracy moved closer, taking my hand in hers. This is surreal, she whispered. Like something from a movie. Except it's my life, I replied, a strange calm settling over me as the pieces fell into place. The frequent business trips, the separate finances, the discouragement from visiting his office, all of it designed to maintain a carefully constructed double life. And now, potentially, a plot to eliminate me entirely. When Jeremy returned, his expression was grim but determined. I spoke with a colleague at the DA's office. We need to proceed cautiously, but there's enough here to warrant a formal investigation. We can request toxicology tests as part of it. Paul nodded in agreement. In the meantime, we need to secure your position, Olivia. I've prepared emergency petitions to freeze all your joint assets and accounts. What's left of them anyway. I've also drafted fraud alerts and identity theft reports to protect you from further financial damage. I signed each document with a steadiness that surprised me, my signature a defiant assertion of my true identity against the forgeries Tony had created. What about Tony? I asked finally. He's supposed to visit this afternoon. The three of them exchanged glances. We don't want to tip him off yet, Paul advised. But given what we've discovered, I don't think you should be alone with him. I'll stay, Tracy said immediately. Jeremy added, I can have a detective I trust come by as well. Plain clothes, nothing obvious. Just as a precaution. The idea that I needed protection from my own husband was almost too much to process. This was Tony, the man who had nursed me through a terrible flu 3 years ago, who had surprised me with tickets to Paris for our 5th anniversary, who had held me as I sobbed after my mother's funeral. Had it all been a calculated performance? A long-term investment in a scheme that ended with my fortune in his hands and me gone? Dr. Marshall arrived during our discussion, concern evident as she noted the tense atmosphere. Mrs. Reynolds, your vitals show elevated stress levels again, she admonished gently. Whatever is happening can wait until you're recovered. Actually, it can't, I replied, my voice stronger than I expected. Doctor, I need to ask you something about my condition. Is it possible that my cyst rupture was induced in some way? Her eye Eyebrows shot up. Induced? What exactly are you asking? Paul stepped forward, introducing himself as my attorney. Dr. Marshall, we have reason to believe Mrs. Reynolds may have been exposed to substances that could have exacerbated or caused her medical emergency. Is that medically possible? The doctor's expression shifted from confusion to professional concern. Theoretically, yes. Certain substances can increase abdominal pressure or affect hormonal balance in ways that might increase the risk of cyst rupture. She looked at me directly. Olivia, is there something specific you're concerned about? I hesitated, the accusation still difficult to voice. My husband. We believe he may have had financial motivations to harm me. The words hung in the air, stark and terrible. Dr. Marshall's professional demeanor didn't waver, but her eyes reflected, understanding. I see, she said carefully. In that case, I can order additional tests. We still have your blood samples from admission. If there was something unusual in your system, we may be able to detect it. She made notes in my chart, her movements deliberate. In the meantime, I'm updating your visitor restrictions. Medical staff and listed approved visitors only. Who should I include on that list? These three, I said, indicating Paul, Jeremy, and Tracy. And Amelia Johnson, she's my assistant. Not your husband? Dr. Marshall asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Especially not my husband, I confirmed. After the doctor left, a heavy silence filled the room. The truth was no longer something I could deny or rationalize away. The evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear. Tony, my husband of 12 years, my partner of 15, had been systematically deceiving me, using me, and now potentially trying to eliminate me. I need a moment, I said quietly. Understanding, the others stepped outside, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I turned to look out the window, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. Somewhere out there, Tony was going about his day, perhaps making final preparations for a life without me. He had emptied our accounts, forged my signature on millions in debt, taken out a life insurance policy without my knowledge, and potentially attempted to cause the medical emergency that had landed me here. The scale of the betrayal was almost incomprehensible, but beneath the shock and hurt, something else was taking root. A steely determination. I had resources he knew nothing about. I had people on my side who were smart, capable, and protective. I was not the helpless victim he had calculated I would be. My phone buzzed. Tony, right on cue. Heading your way. Traffic bad. Be there in 30. I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. The man who had sent this text was a stranger to me. A dangerous predator masquerading as a loving husband. For years I had been living with an illusion, believing in a marriage that existed only in my mind. Tracy peeked back into the room. You okay? He's on his way, I said, holding up my phone. We'll be here in 30 minutes. She nodded, determination replacing concern. We'll be ready. Paul and Jeremy returned, and we quickly formulated a plan. Jeremy would wait outside the room with his detective friend, who had arrived and introduced himself as Detective Morris. Tracy would remain with me, ostensibly just visiting her friend. Paul would be nearby, on call if needed. Remember, Paul advised, don't confront him directly. Don't let on that you know anything. We need more time to secure the legal protections we've put in motion. I nodded, though the thought of pretending everything was normal made my skin crawl. What if he tries something? He won't, Jeremy assured me. Not with witnesses present. And Detective Morris will be right outside. As they took their positions, Tracy squeezed my hand. You can do this, Liv. Just a little longer, and then you never have to see him again. 28 minutes later, there was a soft knock at the door, and Tony entered, a bouquet of lilies in hand and a concerned smile on his face. The sight of him, handsome, well-dressed, the perfect picture of a devoted husband, sent a surge of conflicting emotions through me. This was the face I had woken up to for 12 years, the man I had built my life around, and he was a complete stranger. "Hey, beautiful," he said, leaning in to kiss my forehead. It took every ounce of will not to recoil from his touch. "Sorry, I couldn't get here sooner. How are you feeling today?" "Better," I managed, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "Tracy's been keeping me company." He turned, seemingly noticing Tracy for the first time. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed his face before it was replaced with a warm smile. "Tracy, good to see you. Thanks for looking after." "My girl." Tracy's answering smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. That's what friends do. They're there when you need them." If Tony caught the undercurrent in her words, he didn't show it. He placed the lilies on the side table and sat on the edge of my bed, taking my hand in his. I fought the urge to snatch it away. "I spoke with the doctor in the hallway," he said, his voice gentle with practiced concern. "She says you're making good progress. Should be able to come home by the weekend. Home." The word hung in the air between us, loaded with unspoken truths. The home that was being systematically emptied. The home where another woman had been wearing my clothes, my jewelry. The home that was just another prop in his elaborate deception. "That's the plan," I replied neutrally. "I've been getting everything ready," he continued, "making sure the house is perfect for your recovery." The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. I wondered what he thought getting everything ready entailed. Removing all traces of my possessions? Eliminating evidence of his double life? Preparing whatever came next in his sinister plan? Tracy shifted in her chair, and I sensed her struggle. To maintain her composure, to break the tension, I reached for the water pitcher, deliberately wincing as I moved. Tony immediately stood. "Let me get that for you. Do you need more pain medication? I can call the nurse." "I'm fine," I assured him. "Just sore. The doctor says that's normal." He poured the water, the perfect picture of attentiveness. "I've been so worried about you, Liv. When they called me about the emergency surgery..." He shook his head, his expression somber. It made me realize how precious our time together is. The performance was flawless. The concerned inflection, the meaningful pause, the gentle touch of his hand on mine. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have been moved by his apparent sincerity. Instead, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's temperature. This man had built a career on managing other people's money, on gaining their trust, and making them feel secure. Of course, his deception would be masterful. "They say these things can happen without warning," I said carefully, watching his face. "The doctor mentioned that sometimes there can be contributing factors." For a split second, something flashed in his eyes. Caution? Concern? Before his expression settled back into sympathy. "Well, the important thing is that you're getting better. That's all that matters to me." Tracy stood abruptly. "I should get some coffee. Can I bring either of you anything?" Tony shook his head. "No, thanks. Actually, Tracy, would you mind giving us a few minutes alone? I have some things I need to discuss with Olivia." My heart rate quickened, the monitor beside me betraying my anxiety with faster beeps. Tracy hesitated, her eyes meeting mine. "It's okay," I assured her, though nothing about this situation was okay. "Just a few minutes." She nodded reluctantly. "I'll be right back then." As the door closed behind her, Tony's demeanor shifted subtly. His smile remained, but there was a new calculation in his eyes as he leaned closer. "Alone at last," he said quietly. "There's something important we need to talk about, Liv." The monitor beside my bed continued its betraying rhythm, each accelerated. Beep, marking my rising anxiety. Tony sat on the edge of my bed, too close, his cologne, the one I had given him last Christmas, suddenly cloying and suffocating. "What do we need to talk about?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Tony's expression softened into what I now recognized as his practiced concern, the same look he'd given countless clients before explaining why their investments had underperformed. "It's about our finances," he said, his voice lowered as if sharing a confidence. "I've been meaning to tell you, but with your surgery and everything, there wasn't a good time." I waited, wondering what possible version of the truth he was about to spin. "We've had some setbacks," he continued, his face the perfect picture of regret. "The market's been volatile, and some investments I made for us didn't perform as expected." The audacity of the lie made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of setbacks?" He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Significant ones. I've had to move money around, liquidate some assets. I didn't want to worry you with it, especially not while you're recovering." "How significant?" I pressed, curious to see how much of the truth he would admit. Tony hesitated, seemingly gauging how much to reveal. "We're going to need to make some lifestyle adjustments for a while. The Cape House, I might have to sell it. The Cape House that was never in my name. The Cape House that, according to the documents Paul had shown me, was legally owned by Tony and his other wife, Cindy." "I see," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. "Anything else I should know about?" He patted my hand in what was meant to be a reassuring gesture. "Don't worry about the details now. Focus on getting better. I'll handle everything." "I'm sure you will," I thought bitterly. "Actually," he continued, his tone shifting slightly, "there is something else. The doctor mentioned you might need some specialized medication after discharge. Very expensive, not fully covered by insurance. I've set up a new health savings account for it, and I'll need you to sign some paperwork." He reached into his jacket, pulling out a folded document. "Just a formality, for the insurance company." My heart pounded harder as he smoothed the paper on the adjustable table and held out a pen. Even from my position, I could see this wasn't a standard medical form. The words "power of attorney" were clearly visible at the top. "What exactly am I signing?" I asked, making no move to take the pen. "Like I said, just a formality," Tony repeated, a slight edge entering his voice. "It gives me the ability to deal with the insurance company on your behalf while you're recovering. The complete power of attorney document in front of me would do far more than that. It would give him legal authority over all my affairs, including my business and any accounts he hadn't yet discovered." "You know," I said, fighting to keep my voice casual, "I think I'd feel more comfortable having my lawyer look at this first. Just standard business practice, right? You've always said I should never sign anything without proper review." A flash of irritation crossed his face before he smoothed it into an indulgent smile. "Your lawyer? Come on, Liv. This is just between us, between husband and wife." The monitor beside me beeped faster as my pulse raced. I wondered if Detective Morris was still outside, if Tracy was nearby, if anyone would hear me if I called out. "Still," I insisted, "I'd like to have it reviewed first. You always taught me to be thorough with financial documents." Tony's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I really need this signed today, Olivia. The insurance processing takes time, and we want to make sure your medications are covered when you're discharged." The pressure in his voice, the subtle change in his posture, these were new to me, or perhaps I was simply noticing them for the first time. Had he always been this controlling, and I'd mistaken it for care? "I'm sure the hospital pharmacy can provide a few days' supply until the paperwork is processed," I said, offering what seemed like a reasonable compromise. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Olivia, I need you to trust me on this. Things are more complicated than you realize." The irony of his words was almost laughable. Things were indeed more complicated than I had realized, just not in the way he meant. "Exactly what medications are we talking about?" I asked, stalling for time, praying Tracy would return soon. Tony waved his hand dismissively. It's all very technical. The doctor explained it to me yesterday. Yesterday, when he hadn't visited at all. Another lie. Actually, a firm voice interrupted from the doorway. Mrs. Reynolds' treatment plan doesn't include any specialized medications, requiring insurance pre-approval. Dr. Marshall stood in the entrance, clipboard in hand, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes sharp with suspicion. Behind her, Tracy hovered, relief washing over her face as she saw me. Tony straightened, his charming smile instantly back in place. Doctor, thank you for taking such good care of my wife. I was just explaining to Olivia about the post-discharge medications we discussed. We haven't discussed any such medications, Mr. Reynolds, Dr. Marshall replied coolly. In fact, I don't believe we've spoken at all since Mrs. Reynolds was admitted. The tension in the room was palpable. Tony's smile didn't waver, but I saw his jaw tighten. Perhaps it was another member of your team then, he suggested smoothly. There have been so many people involved in Olivia's care. Dr. Marshall's expression made it clear she didn't believe him. I need to examine Mrs. Reynolds now. I'll have to ask you to step outside. For a moment, I thought Tony might refuse. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Frustration, calculation, anger. Before, he nodded pleasantly. Of course, doctor. I'll come back later, Liv. He leaned down to kiss my forehead, whispering as he did. Think about what I said. This is important. As soon as the door closed behind him, I let out a shuddering breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Tracy rushed to my side, her face pale with concern. Are you okay? What happened? He tried to get me to sign a power of attorney, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. He was insistent. Dr. Marshall frowned, checking the monitors beside my bed. Your heart rate is elevated, and your blood pressure is concerning. She turned to Tracy. Did you contact hospital security as I suggested? Tracy nodded. They're aware of the situation, and Detective Morris is still outside. Good. The doctor made notes in my chart. Mrs. Reynolds, given what you've told me, and what I just witnessed, I'm concerned about your safety. I've ordered those additional tests we discussed, but in the meantime, I'm implementing full visitor restrictions. No one without explicit approval will be allowed in this room. The reality of my situation hit me all at once. My husband of 12 years was not only a liar and a thief, but potentially dangerous. The man I had built a life with, shared a home with, planned a future with, was a stranger. Worse than a stranger. An enemy. I trusted him, I whispered, tears filling my eyes for the first time since this nightmare began. I gave him 15 years of my life. Tracy took my hand, her grip firm and grounding. This is not your fault, Liv. None of this is your fault. She's right, Dr. Marshall added, her professional demeanor softening slightly. What's happening here is criminal deception, not a failure on your part. But as the doctor completed her examination and left us alone, the tears I had been holding back finally broke free. Tracy sat beside me, silent and supportive, as 15 years of memories were rewritten in my mind. Every anniversary, every shared success, every intimate moment now tainted by the knowledge that it had all been a calculated performance. I feel so stupid, I said finally, wiping my eyes. All those times I defended him to my friends when he missed events or forgot important dates. All those lonely nights I told myself he was working hard for our future. He was building a life. All right, just not with me. You couldn't have known, Tracy insisted. Tony was your husband. Trust is the foundation of marriage. But I should have seen something. The signs were there. I thought back to the unexplained expenses, the frequent trips, the way he discouraged me from getting involved in our finances. I just didn't want to see them. Paul and Jeremy returned, their expressions grim as Tracy explained what had happened. "We need to move quickly," Paul said, all business despite the emotion in the room. "That power of attorney attempt suggests he's getting desperate. He knows his window of opportunity is closing." Jeremy nodded in agreement. "The detective outside has already documented the incident. We're building a case, Liv." "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly exhausted. The emotional weight of the day pressed down on me, threatening to overwhelm the fragile strength I had mustered. "Now we accelerate everything," Paul replied. "The asset freeze, the fraud alerts, the protection orders, all of it. And we need to get you somewhere safe as soon as Dr. Marshall clears you for discharge." "I have a friend with a private security firm," Jeremy added. "Former special forces. They can provide discreet protection until we have legal measures in place." The conversation continued around me, a blur of plans and precautions that seemed surreal. This was my life now, hiding from my husband, protected by security, dismantling the remains of a marriage that had been a lie from the start. When they finally left, Tracy promising to return in the morning, Paul and Jeremy heading to their respective offices to file emergency motions, I was alone with my thoughts. The hospital room, which had felt like a prison days earlier, now seemed like a sanctuary. The one place Tony couldn't reach me, at least for now. But I couldn't stay here forever. Eventually, I would have to face the world, face him, face the reality of starting over. My phone buzzed with a text from Tony. "Sorry about the misunderstanding with the doctor. We'll explain everything tomorrow. Love you always." I stared at the words, feeling nothing but a cold, clarifying anger. The tears were done. The shock was passing. In its place, something new was taking root. Determination, resolve, and a burning desire for justice. He had taken so much from me, my trust, my security, my peace of mind. But I still had things he didn't know about. My separate account, my business, my intelligence, and most importantly, my will to fight. I deleted his message without responding and pulled up my banking app, checking my private account. The balance remained untouched, $387,462.09. My secret fortune, the one thing he hadn't managed to steal. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was power. It was the means to reclaim my life and ensure that Tony Reynolds faced consequences for what he had done. Setting the phone aside, I closed my eyes, focusing on my breathing, on the quiet strength building inside me. The betrayal still hurt, a deep, aching wound that would take time to heal. But beneath the pain, I found a strange sense of liberation. For years, I had been living a life designed to accommodate Tony's needs, his schedule, his priorities. Now I could finally live for myself, build something new, become someone stronger, wiser, more cautious perhaps, but ultimately more authentically me. When sleep finally came, it was dreamless and deep, the rest of someone who had faced the worst and survived, someone who had looked betrayal in the eye and refused to be destroyed by it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But for tonight, in this sterile hospital room with its beeping monitors and antiseptic smell, I found an unexpected peace in the knowledge that the truth, however painful, had finally set me free. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting thin stripes across the hospital room as I slowly woke. For a blissful moment, I existed in the space between sleep and full consciousness, where reality hadn't yet reasserted itself. Then, like a wave crashing over me, everything came flooding back. Tony's betrayal, the double life, the attempted power of attorney, the realization that the man I had loved for 15 years was a stranger. But something was different this morning. The crushing weight of betrayal remained, but alongside it was a new sensation. Resolve, clear and sharp as crystal. I was done being a victim, done reacting. It was time to take control. A soft knock at the door preceded a nurse I hadn't seen. Before, her smile professional as she checked my vital signs. "Good morning, Mrs. Reynolds. I'm Natalie, your nurse for today. How are you feeling?" "Better," I replied, surprised to find it was true, at least physically. The pain from surgery had dulled to a manageable ache. "Dr. Marshall will be by shortly," she informed me, making notes in my chart. She mentioned running some additional tests today. I nodded, remembering the doctor's concern about possible toxicity. "Has anyone tried to visit me this morning?" Natalie shook her head. "Not yet, but it's early, and the security alert on your file means only pre-approved visitors are allowed in." After she left, I reached for my phone, ignoring the missed calls and texts from Tony. Instead, I called Tracy. "You're up early," she answered, the sounds of her busy kitchen in the background. "I need a favor," I said without preamble, something I should have done years ago. "Name it." "I want to see Tony's office, the actual office, not the public reception area I visited for company events. Can you get me corporate floor plans for Westmore Financial?" There was a pause. "Liv, you're still in the hospital, and with everything going on." "I'm not going there in person," I clarified. "But I need to understand the layout. I have a theory I need to confirm." Another pause. "What kind of theory?" "Tony always discouraged me from visiting his office, said the security procedures were too cumbersome for casual visits, that it was easier to meet for lunch downtown instead. I accepted that for years, but now—" "You think he was hiding something there too," Tracy finished for me. "Exactly. And I think I know someone who can help us find out what." An hour later, Amelia Johnston, my executive assistant and the person who had run my design business with terrifying efficiency for the past 4 years, walked into my hospital room, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Tracy told me everything," she said, setting her leather portfolio on the adjustable table. "That son of a bitch." Despite everything, I smiled at Amelia's characteristic bluntness. At 62, with her silver hair always perfectly styled and her designer suits impeccably tailored, Amelia projected an aura of refined capability. But beneath the polished exterior was a woman who had survived her own share of hardships and emerged stronger for them. "Thank you for coming," I said, genuinely grateful for her presence. "I know this is unusual." "Unusual?" Amelia raised an eyebrow. "I'd go with criminal, despicable, and worthy of creative vengeance, but unusual works too." She pulled a tablet from her portfolio. "I have what you asked for. Wasn't easy to get on short notice, but it turns out the building management company recently updated their emergency evacuation plans, which include detailed floor layouts." She handed me the tablet, displaying the 14th floor of the downtown office tower where Westmore Financial was headquartered. I scanned the layout, locating Tony's corner office and the surrounding conference rooms. "Interesting," I murmured, noting the office configuration. "And Tracy sent you the other information?" Amelia nodded, pulling out a printout. "Tony's calendar for the past 6 months, exported from the shared system you still have access to. I've highlighted the patterns." I studied the document, seeing what Amelia had already noticed. The regular client meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always scheduled for 3 hours, always with vague descriptions. "He's been consistent," I observed. "Same times each week." "Men usually are," Amelia replied dryly. "Creatures of habit, especially when they think they've established a foolproof routine." I continued examining the floor plan, a plan forming in my mind. The assistant, what was her name? The one who supposedly received the Tiffany bracelet for Administrative Professionals Day. "Melissa Davis," Amelia supplied promptly. "Been with him for about 5 years. 5 years, roughly the same time frame that Tony had allegedly been involved with Cindy Wallace, according to the evidence we'd uncovered. I need to speak with her, I decided. Amelia frowned. "You think she knows something?" "I think she knows everything," I replied. "Executive assistants always do." The question is whether she's complicit or just another person Tony has manipulated. How do you plan to approach her? If she's involved, she'll warn him immediately. I considered the question carefully. Direct confrontation seemed risky, but so did any attempt at subterfuge. What I needed was leverage, something that would make Melissa talk to me instead of Tony. Her employment history, I said suddenly. Can you find out where she worked before Westmore? Amelia was already typing on her phone. Give me 20 minutes. While Amelia stepped out to make calls, Dr. Marshall arrived for morning rounds, her expression serious as she reviewed my chart. The preliminary toxicology results came back, she said, keeping her voice low though we were alone in the room. There were elevated levels of a prescription medication in your system, warfarin. It's a blood thinner, not something you were prescribed. The implications were clear and terrifying. Blood thinners would exacerbate bleeding from a ruptured cyst, potentially turning a serious but manageable condition into a life-threatening emergency. That's not possible, I said, though I knew it was. The spicy pasta dinner Tony had made the night before my collapse, the unusual aftertaste I'd attributed to the cream sauce. Had he been dosing me for days? Weeks? The levels suggest repeated exposure over at least a week, possibly longer, Dr. Marshall confirmed, as if reading my thoughts. Mrs. Reynolds, I've contacted Detective Morris about these findings. This goes beyond financial fraud. Attempted murder. The words remained unspoken between us, but their shadow fell across the room nonetheless. My husband hadn't just been stealing from me. He had been trying to kill me. I understand, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Thank you for telling me. After she left, I sat in stunned silence, processing this new, horrible revelation. The man I had married, the man I had built a life with, had been systematically poisoning me. The betrayal went beyond anything I had imagined. Amelia returned, triumph evident in her expression, but she stopped short when she saw my face. What happened? I told her about the toxicology results, watching her expression shift from shock to cold fury. That settles it, she said when I finished. We're not just protecting your assets anymore. We're taking him down, completely. She sat beside me, taking my hand in a rare display of physical affection. Olivia, listen to me. I've known you for 4 years. In that time, I've watched you build a successful business through sheer talent and determination. I've seen you handle difficult clients, navigate complex projects, and create beautiful spaces that transform people's lives. You are not a victim. You're a force to be reckoned with. Her words resonated somewhere deep inside me, touching the part of myself I'd somehow lost sight of during my marriage. The strong, capable, intelligent woman who had built a thriving business from scratch. You're right, I said, resolve hardening within me. It's time to stop reacting and start acting. Good, Amelia nodded approvingly. Because I found what you asked for. Melissa Davis worked for Wallace Financial Advisors before joining Westmore. Owned by Edward Wallace, who I'm betting is related to our mysterious Cindy. The pieces clicked into place. Her father? Based on the age difference you described, it seems likely, Amelia confirmed. And here's where it gets interesting. Wallace Financial was investigated by the SEC 7 years ago for irregular trading practices. They settled, paid a fine, but several employees were barred from the industry. Melissa wasn't among them, but she left shortly after the settlement. And ended up working for Tony, I mused, connecting the dots. Who then becomes involved with the boss's daughter? The timing fits, Amelia agreed. And there's more. I called a contact at Westmore, pretending to be verifying employment for a loan application Melissa had submitted. When I mentioned the discrepancy in her title, that she was listed as executive assistant, but the loan application said office manager, my contact got very uncomfortable. What did they say? That Melissa's official title is administrative, assistant, but Tony has his own system for his support staff. Amelia's expression was knowing. She's not just his assistant, Olivia. She's a co-conspirator. I absorbed this new information, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. So we have Tony, Cindy Wallace, and Melissa Davis, all potentially involved in whatever scheme they've been running. And possibly Edward Wallace, too, Amelia added. The older man Tracy saw at your house could be him. I thought about the financial evidence Jeremy and Paul had uncovered, the properties, the forged signatures, the loans taken out in my name. This wasn't just a man leaving his wife for another woman. This was an organized financial fraud operation, with me as both resource and victim. We need to get Melissa to talk, I said decisively. And I think I know how. I outlined my plan to Amelia, watching her expression shift from skepticism to cautious approval. It's risky, she said when I finished. If she warns Tony, she won't, I interrupted. Not if we approach her correctly. Melissa isn't the mastermind here, she's a facilitator, and facilitators always protect themselves first. What about Tony? He'll keep trying to contact you, maybe even show up here again. I considered this. I need to keep him at a distance for now, but without making him suspicious. An idea formed. Can you get Tracy to bring me my laptop? I need to send an email. To noon, everything was in motion. Tracy had brought my laptop and was coordinating with Paul and Jeremy, updating them on the toxicology results and our discoveries about Melissa Davis. Amelia had made contact with her former colleague at the SEC, discreetly inquiring about the old Wallace financial investigation and whether any new complaints had surfaced. I sat propped up in the hospital bed, feeling stronger than I had in days as I composed an email to Tony. Tony. The doctors have recommended additional tests that will keep me here through the weekend. They're concerned about potential complications and want to monitor me closely. I'm feeling quite weak and overwhelmed by visitors, so I've asked them to restrict access for now. Just medical staff and Tracy, who's helping with some urgent business matters I can't neglect any longer. I know you're busy handling our financial situation. I appreciate you taking care of things while I recover. Please don't worry about visiting until I'm feeling stronger, probably early next week. Love, Olivia. The words felt hollow, false, but I knew they would serve their purpose, keeping Tony away while making him believe I remained oblivious to his betrayal. The urgent business matters would explain Tracy's constant presence and provide cover for the actions we were taking behind the scenes. After sending the email, I turned to the next phase of our plan. Using the hospital phone rather than my cell, which Tony might be monitoring, I called a number Amelia had provided. Securities and Exchange Commission, Enforcement Division. This is Investigator Hammond. Investigator Hammond, my name is Olivia Reynolds. Amelia Johnson suggested I contact you directly regarding a potential financial fraud case involving Wallace Financial Advisors and Westmore Financial. There was a pause. Ms. Reynolds, I'm familiar with Wallace Financial from a previous investigation. How are you connected to this matter? I believe my husband, Anthony Reynolds of Westmore Financial, has been engaged in an extensive fraud scheme involving properties purchased using forged signatures, falsified loan applications, and identity theft, with my identity being used without my knowledge or consent. These are serious allegations, Ms. Reynolds. Do you have documentation to support them? Yes, I confirmed. Substantial documentation, including evidence of forgery, fraudulent mortgage applications, and unauthorized use of my personal information on financial instruments worth millions of dollars. Another pause. I understand you're currently hospitalized, Ms. Reynolds? Yes. Following a medical emergency that toxicology reports now indicate may have been deliberately induced. I kept my voice steady, professional, despite the enormity of what I was alleging. Induced by whom? Hammond asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. By my husband, Anthony Reynolds, who recently took out a $5 million life insurance policy on me without my knowledge, using a forged signature on the application. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. When Hammond spoke again, his voice had lost its bureaucratic neutrality. "Ms. Reynolds, I'd like to come to the hospital to take your statement and review any documentation you have. This situation clearly involves multiple potential federal offenses, including securities fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, and identity theft." "I'd appreciate that," I replied. "There's something else you should know. My husband's administrative assistant, Melissa Davis, previously worked for Wallace Financial during the period of your earlier investigation. I believe she has information relevant to the current situation." "Melissa Davis," he repeated. "And—" I could hear him typing. "Yes, I see her in our files from the Wallace case. She was interviewed but not charged." There was the sound of more typing. "This is extremely helpful information, Ms. Reynolds. Are you available this afternoon?" "I am. I'll be there at 2 with a colleague. In the meantime, please don't discuss this call with anyone beyond those who already know about your situation." After ending the call, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time since discovering Tony's betrayal, I wasn't merely reacting. I was taking deliberate, strategic action. The pieces were falling into place, a counteroffensive forming that would not only protect me, but bring Tony and his accomplices to justice. Tracy returned with lunch, real food from outside the hospital, thankfully, and updates from Paul. "The emergency motions have been granted," she reported as I ate the first meal that had actually tasted good in days. "Your business assets are completely protected now, and they've frozen what remains of the joint accounts. Paul also filed for emergency divorce proceedings based on fraud and extreme cruelty." "What about the forged loans?" I asked between bites. "Jeremy's working with the mortgage companies. Since there's clear evidence of forgery, they're initiating their own fraud investigations. It won't happen overnight, but you won't be held responsible for those debts?" I nodded, relieved but still aware of how much work lay ahead. "And the SEC investigator?" "Confirmed for 2 o'clock. Amelia did some research. Kevin Hammond has a reputation for being thorough and relentless, exactly what we need." As Tracy cleared away the lunch containers, I checked my email, finding Tony's reply to my message. "Live, rest, and focus on getting better. I'll handle everything on this end. The financial situation is under control. Just had to move some investments around. Nothing for you to worry about. I'll respect the doctor's orders and give you space for now, but I'm here if you need anything. Just call or text anytime. All my love. Tony." The calculated deception in his message made my skin crawl. "The financial situation is under control." Yes, because he had systematically drained our accounts. Nothing for you to worry about, except the millions in fraudulent debt and the apparent attempt on my life. All my love, from a man who had been poisoning me and planning my death. I closed the email without replying, turning instead to the hospital window. Outside, life continued normally. People walking on the sidewalks, traffic flowing, the world spinning on its axis as if my personal universe hadn't been shattered. But something had shifted within me. The initial shock and pain remained, but they no longer dominated my thoughts. Instead, I felt a growing sense of my own power, my own agency. Tony had underestimated me, assumed I would remain the trusting, somewhat naive wife who left the finances to him and focused on her design business. He didn't know about my hidden fortune, the account that had grown to nearly $400,000 over the years. He didn't know about my network of loyal friends and colleagues who were now rallying to my defense. He didn't know that I had discovered not just his betrayal, but his crimes, and was already working with authorities to bring him to justice. Most importantly, he didn't know that the woman lying in this hospital bed was not the same woman he had married. I had evolved, grown stronger through building my business and navigating life's challenges. The Olivia who had once believed in his every word, who had accepted his explanations without question, was gone. In her place was a woman who would not be victimized, who would not be silenced, who would not go quietly into the night. A woman who had resources he knew nothing about and determination he had fatally underestimated. As 2 o'clock approached, I prepared the documents Investigator Hammond would need: copies of the forged signatures, the fraudulent loan applications, the life insurance policy, the toxicology report. Each piece of evidence another nail in the coffin of Tony's freedom, another step toward justice. Tracy sat beside me, her expression solemn. "Are you ready for this? Once you give an official statement to the SEC, there's no going back." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm not the one who should be worried about what happens next." And in that moment, I knew it was true. Tony had emptied our accounts, thinking he was securing his future. But in doing so, he had inadvertently liberated me from illusions, from false security, from a marriage built on lies. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles and emotional challenges. But for the first time in years, perhaps, in my entire adult life, I was truly free to determine my own fate. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of Investigator Hammond and his colleague. As they entered, credentials in hand, I straightened in my hospital bed, ready to tell my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor who was taking back control. "Ms. Reynolds," Hammond greeted me, his handshake firm, "thank you for coming forward. I understand this must be incredibly difficult." "Actually," I replied with newfound clarity, "this is the easiest decision I've made in years." Investigator. Hammond and his colleague, a focused woman named Agent Patel, spent 2 hours with me, meticulously documenting every detail of Tony's deception. They recorded my statement, photographed the evidence, and asked precise, thorough questions that helped fill in gaps I hadn't even realized existed in my understanding of the situation. This level of financial fraud is unfortunately more common than people realize, Hammond explained as Agent Patel organized the documents I had provided. But the combination with identity theft, forgery, and potential attempted murder makes this case particularly serious. "What happens next?" I asked, feeling drained but determined after the lengthy interview. "We'll open a formal investigation." "Immediately," Hammond replied. "The evidence you've provided gives us more than enough probable cause. We'll coordinate with local law enforcement regarding the toxicology findings. That falls under their jurisdiction, not ours." Agent Patel looked up from her tablet. "We should discuss Ms. Davis as well." Hammond nodded. "Yes, your theory about Melissa Davis's involvement is compelling, Ms. Reynolds, but approaching her directly could be risky." "I understand," I said, though part of me still wanted to confront her, to see the face of another person who had facilitated Tony's betrayal. "What do you suggest?" "We'd like to handle that contact ourselves," Hammond explained. "Given the patterns you've identified in your husband's calendar and Ms. Davis's background with Wallace Financial, we have enough to bring her in for questioning." "Will she talk?" Tracy asked skeptically. "She's been working with Tony for years." Hammond's expression was knowing. "In my experience, when faced with potential charges of conspiracy to commit financial fraud, most people become remarkably cooperative, especially when they realize they might not be the mastermind, but could still face the same penalties." After, they left, promising to be in touch the following day. I leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion washing over me. The emotional and physical toll of the past days was catching up, leaving me drained but also oddly peaceful. Action had replaced reaction, strategy had overcome shock. "You should rest," Tracy said, noting my fatigue. "I'll stay if you want." I shook my head. "Go home. Get some proper sleep. I'm safe here with the visitor restrictions." I managed a small smile. "Besides, I need some time to process everything." It's been intense. After Tracy reluctantly departed, promising to return first thing in the morning, I found myself alone for the first time in days. The hospital room was quiet, save for the gentle hum of medical equipment and the occasional distant voice from the corridor. I reached for my notebook, feeling a need to organize my thoughts, to map out what I knew and what steps remained. Making lists had always helped me think clearly, whether planning complex design projects or navigating personal challenges. On a fresh page, I began to outline what I had learned. Tony's deception. Apparent relationship with Cindy Wallace for at least 5 years, possible marriage to her 4 years ago, bigamy, connection to Wallace. Financial through Edward Wallace, Cindy's father. Systematic financial fraud involving forged signatures, multiple properties purchased without my knowledge. Large loans taken in my name. Emptied our joint accounts. Possible attempted murder. Via warfarin poisoning. My current position. Physically recovering but still in hospital. Separate account secure. 387,462, U09. Design business protected legally. Emergency divorce proceedings initiated. SEC investigation launched. Local police investigating poisoning. Support network in place. Tracy. Amelia, Paul, Jeremy. Immediate needs. Safe place to stay after discharge. Security measures. Access to business operations. Financial independence. Emotional support. Unanswered questions. Full extent of Tony's financial crimes. Others involved. Beyond Tony, Cindy, Melissa, and Edward, what happens to our home? How to rebuild life after divorce? Long-term security measures? As I wrote, clarity emerged from chaos. The situation, while still overwhelming, began to feel more manageable when broken down into discrete challenges rather than one catastrophic whole. I had resources, financial, legal, and personal, and I had a strategy forming. My phone buzzed, with a text from Tony. Hope you're resting well. Don't worry about anything but getting better. Love you. I set the phone aside without responding, his words meaningless now that I understood their hollow nature. Instead, I returned to my notebook, adding a new section. Strategic priorities. 1. Complete physical recovery. Secure temporary housing. Maintain business operations. Cooperate with investigations. Protect financial assets. Begin emotional healing process. The last item gave me pause. Emotional healing felt like a distant concern amid the practical chaos. Yet I knew it would eventually become central to moving forward. The betrayal I had suffered went beyond financial. It was a profound violation of trust, a complete dismantling of the life and relationship I had believed in. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Dr. Marshall entered, chart in hand. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her professional demeanor softened by genuine concern. "Physically or emotionally?" I replied with a wry smile. "Both," she said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. An unusual move that signaled this wasn't a routine. Check. Physically, better. The pain is manageable. Emotionally, I gestured vaguely. Processing. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. I received the complete toxicology report. Her expression grew serious. The warfarin levels suggest deliberate administration over at least 2 weeks, with increasing dosages. This wasn't accidental, Olivia. Though I had already suspected as much, hearing the medical confirmation sent a chill through me. He was trying to kill me. It appears so, she confirmed gravely. The detective has been updated. They'll want to speak with you again tomorrow. Thank you, I said simply, grateful for her directness, her refusal to sugarcoat the truth. There's something else, she continued. Given these findings and your overall progress, I'm inclined to discharge you tomorrow, but I have serious concerns about your safety. I won't be going home, I assured her quickly. Arrangements are being made for secure temporary housing. She nodded, relief evident. Good. I've also spoken with the hospital's risk management team. They've approved having a security officer outside your room tonight, just as an added precaution. The gesture touched me deeply. That's very kind. It's procedure in cases of suspected domestic violence, she replied matter-of-factly, though her eyes conveyed compassion rather than clinical detachment. Which, make no mistake, this is, just with the added elements of financial crimes and attempted murder. After Dr. Marshall left, I returned to my notebook, adding details from our conversation. The reality of what Tony had been doing, for weeks, was almost too horrific to comprehend fully. He hadn't just been planning to leave me. He had been systematically working to end my life. Yet, strangely, this knowledge strengthened rather than weakened me. The absolute clarity of his malice eliminated any lingering doubt, any misplaced hope that there had been some explanation, some misunderstanding. Tony Reynolds was not just a liar and a thief. He was a would-be murderer. My phone buzzed again, this time with a series of updates from Paul. Emergency order granted freezing any new accounts opened in your name. Judge approved expedited divorce proceedings based on evidence of fraud and cruelty. Temporary restraining order in place against Tony. Legally can't contact you now. The last message gave me a profound sense of relief. I wouldn't have to maintain the charade of normalcy in my communications with him any longer. The legal shield was in place, protecting me from direct contact with the man who had tried to kill me. As evening settled over the hospital, I felt a curious sense of calm. The storm wasn't over, far from it, but I had found my footing within it. Tomorrow I would leave this hospital room and begin the process of rebuilding my life, reclaiming my identity, ensuring that Tony and his accomplices faced justice for what they had done. I opened my banking app, checking my private account once more. The balance remained secure. $387,462. Not a fortune by some standards, but enough to provide immediate security, enough to ensure I wouldn't be financially dependent on anyone while I sorted out the legal mess Tony had created. My hidden fortune, the safety net I had built over years, following my mother's wise advice, would now become the foundation of my new beginning. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something approaching optimism. Not naive hope, but a grounded belief in my own resilience, my own capacity to overcome this betrayal and create something better from its ashes. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to envision that future, a life free from deception, built on my own terms, surrounded by people who had proven their loyalty during this crisis. It wouldn't be the life I had planned, the future I had once imagined with Tony, but perhaps it would be something stronger, more authentic, more truly mine. The security officer stationed outside my door introduced himself briefly, a retired police officer named David who would be there throughout the night. His presence, along with the hospital's visitor restrictions, created a cocoon of safety that allowed me to truly rest for the first time in days. As sleep approached, I thought of Tony, wondering if he had any idea what was coming for him. Did he know that his carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse? That the woman he had underestimated, the wife he had thought he could eliminate so easily, was now at the center of multiple investigations into his crimes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, but for now, in this quiet hospital room with its rhythmic monitoring beeps and antiseptic scent, I had found something I thought I'd lost forever amid the betrayal. Peace. Morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Dr. Marshall completed her final examination, confirming I was ready for discharge, but emphasizing the need for continued rest and follow-up appointments. Detective Morris returned, accompanied by his partner, to take an Additional statement regarding the toxicology findings and to discuss safety measures. We're coordinating with the SEC on this case, he explained as his partner took notes. Given the financial crimes aspect and the evidence of attempted murder, this has become a multi-agency investigation. Has Tony been arrested? I asked, suddenly realizing I didn't know his current status. Detective Morris shook his head. Not yet. We're building the case methodically to ensure charges stick. The SEC is moving on the financial fraud angle while we focus on the poisoning evidence. We don't want to tip our hand too early. The thought of Tony still being free sent a wave of anxiety through me, despite the restraining order and security measures in place. Don't worry, Detective Morris assured me, noting my expression. He's under surveillance, and he has no idea you've discovered anything. As far as he knows, you're still the oblivious wife in the hospital. Their tactical approach made sense, but the reality of Tony walking free, perhaps with Cindy, perhaps continuing to plot against me, was unsettling. I pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the immediate next steps. Tracy arrived mid-morning, with a small suitcase of clothes and necessities she had gathered from my office, not from my home. Everything you need for a few days, she explained, and I've booked you into the executive suite at the Madison under my name. The security, Team Jeremy arranged, will meet us there. The Madison was a boutique hotel across town, discreet and upscale, not somewhere Tony would think to look for me. The executive suite designation meant enhanced privacy and separate secure access, practical considerations that had become suddenly essential in my new reality. As I changed into regular clothes, simple black pants and a loose sweater that wouldn't irritate my healing incision, I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked different somehow. Thinner, certainly, after days of hospital food and stress, but there was something else in my eyes. A hardness, a clarity that hadn't been there before. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me, yet paradoxically, I felt more myself than I had in years. The shock of betrayal had stripped away pretense, removed the filters through which I had viewed my marriage, my husband, my life. What remained was essential, authentic, the core of who I was beneath the roles I had played for so long. By noon, the discharge process was complete. A hospital volunteer arrived with a wheelchair, standard procedure, though I felt capable of walking, and Tracy gathered my belongings as Detective Morris confirmed the security arrangements for my transfer to the Madison. We'll have an unmarked car following yours, he explained. Just a precaution. The restraining order has been served, but we're not taking any chances. As the volunteer wheeled me toward the exit where Tracy's car waited, my phone buzzed with a text. Despite the restraining order, Tony was still trying to reach me. Liv, tried calling the hospital, but they said you're being discharged. Why didn't you tell me? Where are you going? I should be the one taking you home. Call me ASAP. The desperate tone, the demand for information, his control was slipping, and he knew it. I handed the phone to Detective Morris without responding. Add violation of restraining order to his charges, I said simply. Morris nodded, documenting the message before returning the phone. He's getting nervous. That's good. People make mistakes when they're nervous. As we approached the hospital, exit, sunlight streaming through the glass doors, I felt a momentary hesitation. Beyond those doors lay an uncertain future, a world forever changed by what I now knew. For a brief instant, I longed for the security of ignorance, for the life I had believed in just days ago. Then I remembered the toxicology report, the forged signatures, the emptied accounts, the other woman wearing my bracelet in my home. I remembered that the security I had felt was an illusion, that the man I had trusted had been slowly killing me, figuratively and literally. Taking a deep breath, I stood from the wheelchair at the hospital threshold, determined to walk out on my own strength, on my own terms. Tracy beside me, Detective Morris behind, I stepped into the sunlight, leaving the hospital and the last vestiges of my old life behind. The world outside was bright, almost painfully so after days in the muted lighting of the hospital. But as my eyes adjusted, I felt a surge of determination, of readiness for whatever came next. Tony had emptied our accounts, not knowing about my hidden fortune. He had underestimated me, not realizing the strength I possessed. His mistake. His final, fatal miscalculation. The executive suite at the Madison was more like a luxury apartment than a hotel room. A spacious living area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. A separate bedroom with an enormous bed. Draped in high-thread count linens, a marble bathroom with a soaking tub I immediately coveted, and a small but well-appointed kitchenette. "This is perfect," I told Tracy as she set my suitcase in the bedroom. "Thank you. The hotel staff knows you're here under my name for privacy reasons," she explained, opening the curtains to let in more light. "Room service? Housekeeping. Everything's been arranged with discretion in mind." A soft knock at the door announced, Jeremy's security contact, a composed athletic woman named Marie, who introduced herself as my personal security consultant. "I'll be on site whenever you're here," she explained, her manner professional but warm. "My colleague Chris will cover when I'm off duty. We've already secured the premises and established protocols with hotel management." The level of protection felt simultaneously reassuring and surreal, another reminder of how drastically my life had changed in just a few days. "Is all this really necessary?" I asked, not because I doubted the threat, but because I still struggled to fully accept that the man I had loved was capable of such calculated harm. Marie's expression remained neutral, but her eyes conveyed understanding. "Mr. Reynolds has demonstrated both financial motivation and willingness to cause you serious harm. Until he's in custody, these measures are absolutely necessary." After reviewing security protocols and exchanging contact information, Marie took up her position outside my suite. Tracy helped me unpack the few items she had brought, arranging toiletries in the bathroom and hanging clothes in the closet that seemed absurdly large for my temporary needs. "Amelia called while we were en route," Tracy said as she worked. "The SEC moved faster than expected. They questioned Melissa Davis this morning." My pulse quickened. And she talked. A lot, apparently. Tracy's expression was grim but satisfied. Amelia's contact at the SEC said Melissa provided details about Tony's arrangement with Edward Wallace, including documentation of what they're calling a systematic fraud operation. "Did she mention Cindy?" Tracy nodded. "Confirmed everything. Tony and Cindy have been involved for years, married, or fake married, for 4 of them. Melissa helped manage the logistics of his double life, including creating fake business trips that were actually time spent with Cindy." The confirmation of what I had already suspected should have hurt, but instead, I felt an odd sense of validation. I hadn't been paranoid or jumping to conclusions. The betrayal was real, extensive, and exactly as calculated as I had feared. "What about the poisoning?" I asked, the question I had been avoiding but needed to address. Tracy's expression darkened. "Melissa claims no knowledge of that. Says it was all Tony. That she never agreed to anything that would physically harm you." She paused. Whether that's true or she's just minimizing her own culpability remains to be seen. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted, despite having done nothing more strenuous than travel from the hospital to the hotel. The emotional weight of it all, the constant revelations, each more disturbing than the last, was taking a toll that no amount of rest seemed to alleviate. "You should lie down for a while," Tracy suggested, noting my fatigue. "Doctor's orders were rest, remember?" I nodded, too tired to argue. "Will you stay? At least for a bit?" "Of course," she assured me. "I'll be right out there if you need anything." Alone. In the bedroom, I stretched out carefully on the plush mattress, mindful of my still healing incision. The ceiling above me was pristine white, unmarred by the water stains that had characterized our bedroom at home. the ceiling I had stared at for countless nights while Tony worked late or traveled for business. Home. The concept felt distant now, disconnected from my reality. The house Tony and I had shared for years no longer represented safety or comfort. It was just another stage set for his elaborate deception, another asset in the financial game he had been playing. As I drifted toward sleep, my thoughts turned to the things that had been taken from our house: my grandmother's secretary desk, the artwork I had collected, the jewelry beyond what Cindy had already claimed. Material possessions, ultimately replaceable, but many carrying memories and emotional significance that couldn't be quantified. What would happen to it all? Would I ever recover those pieces of my past? Did I even want to, given the taint of betrayal that now colored everything associated with my marriage? These questions followed me into uneasy dreams, fragments of memory and imagination blending into a restless sleep that left me disoriented when I awoke hours later to the gentle knock of Tracy checking on me. "Sorry to wake you," she said, "but Paul is here. He has updates he thought you'd want to hear right away." I sat up slowly, noting that the sunlight had shifted. I had slept longer than intended. "Give me a minute to freshen up." In the bathroom, I splashed cool water on my face and ran a brush through my hair, studying my reflection. The hospital pallor remained, but some color had returned to my cheeks. I looked tired, but no longer fragile, a woman weathering a storm, rather than drowning in it. Paul was waiting in the living area, suit jacket draped over a chair, shirt sleeves rolled up as he reviewed documents spread across the coffee table. He stood when I entered, concern and something like admiration in his expression. "You look better," he said simply. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I replied honestly. "But the truck is in reverse now, so that's progress." He smiled at my attempt at humor. "That's a good way to put it." He gestured to the documents. "We have developments, significant ones." I sat across from him, Tracy bringing me a glass of water before taking a seat nearby. "Tell me." "First, the restraining order violation has been documented, and the judge has approved an enhancement that specifically prohibits Tony from accessing any property or accounts connected to you, including your business." I nodded, relieved that my company would be further protected. "What about the house?" "That's more complicated," Paul admitted. "Since it's in both your names, we're still working through the legal process to secure it. However," he continued, sliding a document toward me, "we've discovered something interesting about the mortgage." I scanned the paper, a loan modification agreement dated 3 years ago that I had never seen before. "What am I looking at?" "Tony refinanced your home. Mortgage without your knowledge, using a forged signature. He took out equity, about $300,000. But here's the key point. The forgery voids the modification. The original mortgage, which was properly executed with your authentic signature, remains the valid instrument." "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning, the equity he extracted wasn't legally his to take. The bank has already acknowledged this and initiated their own fraud investigation. The $300,000 will be restored to the property value, which benefits you in the divorce settlement." I absorbed this information, a small victory amid the larger battle. "What about my personal belongings that were removed from the house?" Paul's expression tightened. "We filed an emergency motion for return of property. The police have documented the items Tracy photographed being removed. They're considered stolen goods at this point. And Cindy? Edward Wallace? Where do they stand in all this?" "The SEC is handling that angle," Paul replied. "Based on what Melissa Davis revealed, they're building a case against both Wallaces for conspiracy to commit securities fraud, among other charges. Apparently, this scheme goes well beyond just you and Tony." The scope of the deception continued to expand, layers upon layers of calculated fraud. I wondered how many other victims were out there, how many other lives had been upended by this network of deceit. There's something else, Paul continued, his tone shifting slightly. The toxicology report from the hospital has been forwarded to the district attorney's office. They're considering attempted murder charges against Tony. The words hung in the air, stark and terrible despite being expected. Attempted murder. My husband of 12 years had tried to kill me. When will they arrest him? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. They're coordinating with the SEC and FBI to determine the optimal timing. It's a complex case with multiple jurisdictions involved. Paul hesitated. There's a possibility they'll offer Melissa Davis immunity or a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against Tony and the Wallaces. I considered this, surprised to find I had no strong feelings about Melissa's potential deal. She had facilitated Tony's betrayal, certainly, but he was the architect of this nightmare, the one who had shared my bed while plotting my death. Whatever helps build the strongest case, I said finally. We spent the next hour reviewing additional documents, court filings, asset declarations, preliminary divorce terms. Through it all, I found myself strangely detached from the material. Considerations. The house, the cars, the investment accounts. They had once seemed so important, the markers of our successful life together. Now they were just items on a ledger, pieces to be divided and reassigned. You're entitled to considerably more than what's outlined here, Paul noted, concerned by my apparent lack of interest in fighting for certain assets. I know, I replied, but I'm reassessing what actually matters to me. And I was. The betrayal had forced a complete reevaluation of what I valued, what I needed, versus what I merely wanted. The physical trappings of our marriage, the designer furniture, the luxury cars, the vacation property, no longer held the same significance. They had been part of a life built on lies, props in Tony's elaborate performance of devotion. What mattered now was my independence, my safety, my business that I had built with genuine effort and skill. My relationships with people who had proven their loyalty, Tracy, Amelia, Paul, Jeremy. My health and well-being, so recently threatened by the man who had vowed to cherish me. There are a few personal items I want to reclaim, I told Paul, thinking of my mother's jewelry, my grandmother's desk, the artwork I had collected before meeting Tony. Things that have meaning beyond their monetary value. The rest, I can rebuild. Paul studied me thoughtfully. You know, most clients in your position are understandably devastated, barely functioning. You're different. I'm still devastated, I admitted. But I'm also angry, determined, and, strangely enough, relieved. Relieved? I nodded, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. I've been living a lie for years without knowing it. Now I can see the truth and move forward authentically. There's freedom in that, despite everything. After Paul left, promising updates as the various investigations progressed, Tracy ordered room service for us. Simple comfort food that appealed more than any gourmet meal could have in that moment. As we ate, my phone buzzed with a message from Amelia. Office running smoothly. Clients have been told you're recovering from surgery and working remotely. The Anderson project presentation has been moved to next month. They were very understanding. Take all the time you need. The thoughtful message reminded me that beyond the chaos of my personal life, my business, the design firm I had built from nothing into a respected name, continued to function. My professional identity remained intact, untouched by Tony's betrayal. I should get back to work soon, I mused, setting down my phone. Not physically in the office, but at least reconnecting with projects. Tracy gave me a skeptical look. You just got out of the hospital today. Maybe give yourself a minute? Work has always centered me, I explained. And right now, I could use some normalcy. Some reminder that not everything in my life was a lie. She nodded, understanding dawning. Your business was always yours. Something Tony couldn't touch or control. I get it. Exactly. I smiled, feeling a renewed appreciation for how well Tracy knew me. Besides, I'm going to need that income now more than ever. You have your secret account, she reminded me. Yes, I agreed. But that's my safety net, not my future. I don't want to just survive this, Tracy. I want to thrive in spite of it. As night fell over the city, visible through the suite's expansive windows, I felt a subtle shift within myself. The initial shock was giving way to resolution, the pain to purpose. Tony had emptied our accounts, thinking he was securing his future while destroying mine. He couldn't have been more wrong. I woke early in my hotel suite, the distant hum of city traffic a stark contrast to hospital sounds. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Tony, all violations of the restraining order, all dutifully forwarded to Detective Morris. Each desperate attempt only strengthened the case against him. After a shower that felt gloriously normal, I settled, at the dining table with my laptop and coffee, ready to rebuild my life systematically. First priority, financial assessment. I created a detailed spreadsheet listing assets, my separate account, $387,462.09, business valuation, $1.2 million, and personal property, value pending. The liabilities section separated legitimate debts from fraudulent loans Tony had secured with forged signatures. The financial picture was reassuring. Even without potential divorce settlements, I had resources to maintain independence. Tony had emptied our joint accounts, but my separate finances remained intact. Marie, my security detail, delivered breakfast arranged by Tracy. Everything quiet overnight? All clear, she confirmed. The investigators will arrive at 10:30. I called Amelia for a business update. She had everything under control, projects progressing smoothly. The Anderson presentation materials are nearly complete, she reported efficiently. Whenever you're ready to review them, just say the word. Discussing normal business matters felt surreal but grounding amid personal chaos. My company remained untouched by Tony's deception, a testament to my own vision and hard work. I drafted a comprehensive plan for moving forward, breaking down priorities into time frames. Immediate, 1-2 weeks. Recovery, housing, banking, personal belongings, legal documents. Short-term, 1-3 months. Permanent housing, investigations, divorce. Business strategy, medium-term, 3-6 months. Social connections, therapy, business growth, new routines. Long-term, 6+ months. Investment strategy, potential relocation, new interests, helping others. The planning process felt therapeutic. These organizing skills that had built my business would now help reconstruct my life. At 10:30, Jeremy arrived with Detective Morris and Investigator Hammond, Paul joining shortly after. We have significant developments, Hammond began. Search warrants revealed substantial evidence at your house and the financial firms. What evidence? I pressed. A locked safe containing fraudulent loan documentation and warfarin, matching your toxicology reports, Morris explained. The scheme extends beyond you, at least 20 victims identified so far. Tony's in custody, Jeremy announced, along with Edward Wallace and Cindy. The revelation hit hard. Tony arrested, facing charges of attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, and forgery. What happens next? I asked. Tony will be arraigned today. We expect bail to be denied, Morris explained. The financial crimes investigation continues expanding. Paul outlined my strengthened legal position while confirming arrangements to inventory my personal belongings the following day. I'd like to be there, I insisted, despite Jeremy's objections. As the meeting concluded, I felt a mix of apprehension, relief, and determination. Tony had emptied our accounts thinking he was securing his future at my expense. Instead, he sat in a jail cell while I remained free to rebuild. His hidden deception had been exposed. My hidden fortune remained secure. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. Standing outside what had once been my home, I felt strangely detached, as if viewing a movie set rather than the place I'd lived for 8 years. The colonial facade with its manicured lawn looked exactly as I remembered, yet completely foreign. Tracy stood beside me while Jeremy waited by his car. Detective Morris greeted us at the door, where a uniformed officer stood guard. "You don't have to do this today," Tracy said gently. I shook my head. "I need to see it. All of it." Morris unlocked the door, not with my key, but with one provided by the police. Even this small detail underscored how this was no longer my home. The entryway looked different immediately. My antique console table replaced by a modern glass one I'd never seen before. The living room revealed similar changes. My carefully selected furniture partially replaced with pieces that clashed with the architecture. "Cindy's taste," I murmured, recognizing the transformation had begun while I lay in the hospital. "We need to document everything," I said, slipping into the practical mindset that had built my business. "What's missing? What's been added? What remains?" Upstairs, our bedroom had undergone the most dramatic transformation. The closet told the disturbing story. Half my clothes missing, the space filled with an unfamiliar wardrobe in styles I never wore. "She was moving in," Tracy observed, photographing everything. "While you were in the hospital." The jewelry box revealed more losses. My mother's irreplaceable pieces gone, along with other sentimental items. Through the methodical inventory, I maintained composure until we reached the dining room. There, my grandmother's heirloom porcelain set lay carelessly stacked, several pieces chipped or broken. I lifted a damaged cup, its handle now separated, and felt something inside me give way. Not with tears, but with cold, crystalline anger. "This was deliberate," I said quietly. "This wasn't carelessness, it was malice." In the basement office, evidence technicians were finishing their work. The lead technician showed Morris a small notebook with neat handwriting. Dosage notes. Dates, times, amounts administered. Correlates with the victim's hospitalization timeline. Significant. "Evidence for the attempted murder charge," Morris told me. By late afternoon, we had documented everything. When Tracy asked what I wanted to take immediately, I surprised her by selecting just a few items: a photo of my parents, my grandmother's quilt, some books, and my personal laptop. "That's all?" she asked. "For now," I confirmed. "The rest is just stuff. This isn't my home anymore." Detective Morris approached with a small evidence bag. "We found this in the safe." Inside was my mother's locket. I clasped it around my neck, the familiar weight reconnecting me to my past, and the woman who had advised me to maintain financial independence. Back at the hotel, I began reclaiming my life, drafting professional emails to clients, reviewing ongoing projects, and making a decisive transfer from my hidden fortune. $150,000 allocated to business development, with the remainder secured in my separate account. Tony had emptied our accounts, thinking he was destroying my security. Instead, he had inadvertently freed me from the golden handcuffs of our marriage. Now, with my hidden fortune and business poised for growth, I was positioned not merely to survive his betrayal, but to thrive beyond it. His calculated betrayal. My calculated response. The balance of justice slowly shifting in my favor. 1 week after visiting my former home, I stood in a penthouse apartment in the city's arts district. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased spectacular views of the river and downtown skyline. The open concept with abundant natural light appealed to my designer's eye. "It's available immediately?" I confirmed, already mentally arranging furniture. "Yes," the agent, a former client who had arranged this private showing, replied. "The owner relocated overseas. They're motivated to lease. Quickly to the right tenant. I'll take it," I decided, my decisiveness surprising even me. The monthly rent was substantial, more than my previous housing expenses when shared with Tony. But my financial situation supported it, especially given the building's security features. 24-hour doorman, restricted elevator access, and state-of-the-art surveillance. Beyond safety, the apartment represented something more valuable: a fresh start, a space untainted by betrayal, a home exclusively mine. By afternoon, I had signed the lease and transferred the required funds from my separate account. The first significant withdrawal from my hidden fortune felt momentous, not diminishing my security, but actively building my new life. "You're moving quickly," Tracy observed when I called. "Are you sure about this?" "Completely," I confirmed. "The hotel is lovely, but not sustainable long-term. I need my own space to truly begin again." "What about furniture?" "Your things are still tied up in the investigation." "I'm starting fresh," I explained. "In fact, I'd like your help with something. Meet me at the design center tomorrow?" The next day. Tracy watched with amusement as I moved purposefully through the high-end furniture showrooms, making decisions with uncharacteristic speed. "You usually deliberate for weeks before selecting a single sofa for clients," she noted, as I approved a modern sectional within minutes of seeing it. "This is different," I explained, already moving to examine a glass dining table. "I'm not designing for a client with specific needs and existing pieces. I'm creating a blank slate." By day's end, I had ordered everything necessary for immediate occupancy: bedroom, living room, and dining essentials, with delivery scheduled for the following week. The remaining rooms would evolve organically as I settled in. That evening, back at the hotel, Paul called with updates. The preliminary hearing for Tony had been scheduled, with the prosecution presenting a compelling case for denying bail. The judge had agreed, citing flight risk and the severity of charges. "He'll remain in custody through trial," Paul confirmed. "The evidence is overwhelming, Olivia. Multiple forgery examples, the dosage notebook, financial records documenting systematic fraud." "And Cindy?" I asked, curious about the woman who had tried to replace me. "Also denied bail, though Edward Wallace was released with electronic monitoring due to health concerns." I felt a weight lift, not just because justice was proceeding, but because this decisive action formalized my separation from my old life. The apartment lease, the new furniture, Tony's incarceration, all represented irreversible steps forward. This wasn't just leaving a marriage, it was crossing a threshold into a new existence entirely of my own making. For the first time since discovering Tony's betrayal, I felt something beyond determination or anger or relief. I felt possibility, the exhilarating awareness that my future was now completely unscripted, beholden to no one's vision but my own. First morning in the new apartment dawned with brilliant sunshine streaming through the uncovered windows. I hadn't yet installed blinds or curtains, preferring for now the unfiltered light and panoramic views that had initially attracted me to the space. The essential furniture had been delivered the previous day: a pristine white platform bed, the modern sectional in subtle gray, the glass dining table with sleek chairs. The space remained minimalist, almost austere, but intentionally so. Each item I brought into this sanctuary would have purpose, meaning connection to the life I was now creating rather than the one I'd left behind. I was sipping coffee from newly purchased mugs when my phone rang. Jeremy, calling earlier than usual. "Are you sitting down?" he asked without preamble. "Yes." "Why?" "Tony's requested a meeting with you." The mug paused halfway to my lips. "What?" "Through his attorney. He wants to speak with you directly." Jeremy's tone was carefully neutral. "You're under no obligation to agree, of course." "Did he say why?" "Allegedly to offer information about additional assets you may not know about." His lawyer suggested, "It could be beneficial to your financial recovery." I set the mug down, processing this unexpected development. "What does Paul think?" "He thinks it's a manipulation tactic. Tony's facing serious charges, and cooperation could potentially reduce his sentence." I moved to the window, gazing out at the cityscape while considering my options. Part of me was curious. What could Tony possibly say after everything that had happened? Another part recoiled at the thought of seeing him again, of being subjected to his manipulations. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Later that morning, I visited my office for the first time since my hospitalization. Amelia had arranged a low-key welcome, sensitive to the fact that not everyone knew the details of my situation. The familiar environment grounded me, reminding me of the professional identity I'd built independently of Tony. My design team updated me on ongoing projects, particularly the Anderson renovation that could transform our firm's profile in the high-end commercial sector. Their enthusiasm and competence reinforced what I already knew. This part of my life remained strong, unblemished by betrayal. During lunch with Amelia in my private office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Please see Tony. He's desperate. He made terrible mistakes, but he does care about you. He's not the monster you think. Melissa." I showed the message to Amelia, whose eyes narrowed. Melissa Davis? The woman cooperating with prosecutors? Apparently not cooperating as thoroughly as we thought. Or being manipulated herself, Amelia suggested. Either way, she's violating the terms of her agreement by contacting you. I forwarded the message to Detective Morris, who responded immediately. "Do not engage. Documented as witness tampering. Thank you for reporting." By evening, the news had spread through our legal team. Tony's attempted manipulation had backfired. Spectacularly. His bail hearing appeal was now summarily denied, and Melissa faced additional charges. Sitting on my new sofa that night, watching city lights sparkle below, I felt a curious sense of closure. Tony had tried one more time to control the narrative, to manipulate me into engagement. Instead, he'd revealed his desperation, his inability to accept that I had moved beyond his reach, financially, legally, and emotionally. The consequence of his actions continued to unfold, not through my vengeance, but through his own inability to stop calculating, scheming, manipulating. Even from a jail cell, he couldn't help himself. Even from a jail cell, he continued to lose. 3 months after moving into my new apartment, I realized I'd gone an entire day without thinking about Tony. The revelation came as I reviewed design proposals with my team, fully absorbed in creative possibilities for an upcoming project. Only later, preparing dinner in my now fully furnished kitchen, did it strike me. My mind had been completely free of him, focused instead on present challenges and future opportunities. This small victory felt more significant than many of the legal and financial ones that had accumulated in recent weeks. The divorce was finalized with unprecedented speed, given the criminal charges. My ownership of the business was uncontested. Most of the fraudulent loans had been invalidated due to the forgery evidence, with several financial institutions reaching settlements rather than facing public scrutiny. What couldn't be recovered financially was offset by something more valuable: freedom from uncertainty, from deception, from the constant undercurrent of something being not quite right in my marriage. My apartment had evolved from a stylish but impersonal space to a true reflection of my aesthetic and lifestyle. Modern, clean lines juxtaposed with organic textures. Open space balanced with intimate nooks for reading or creative thinking. Art I'd selected myself, not as a compromise between two tastes, but as pure self-expression. Even my professional life had transformed. The Anderson project had exceeded expectations, leading to 2 similar commissions from companies in their network. I'd hired 3 new designers to manage the increased workload, and Amelia had taken on expanded administrative responsibilities, allowing me to focus on creative direction. Tracy noticed the change during our weekly dinner, now a standing tradition in my new life. "You seem lighter," she observed, pouring more wine for both of us. "More present." "I feel it," I confirmed. "Like I've been carrying a weight for years without realizing it." "And the news about Cindy didn't set you back?" I shook my head. The previous week had brought the surprising development that Cindy Wallace had accepted a plea deal, agreeing to testify against both Tony and her father in exchange for reduced charges. The arrangement had been unexpected, fracturing what prosecutors had assumed was a unified front. Honestly, I feel nothing about her anymore. She's just another person Tony manipulated, albeit a willing participant. I sipped my wine thoughtfully. I'm more interested in her testimony revealing additional assets we haven't discovered yet. According to Paul, Cindy's cooperation had already exposed 2 offshore accounts and a property in the Cayman Islands purchased with diverted client funds. The financial web continued to unravel, with each revelation confirming the extent of Tony's criminal enterprises. But these developments felt increasingly distant from my daily reality, like updates from a story I'd once been part of, but had now moved beyond. My mother's advice about financial independence had saved me from complete devastation. But rebuilding went beyond bank balances. It was about reclaiming agency in every aspect of life. My hidden fortune had given me a foundation. My own strength was building the rest. This new life wasn't just about surviving betrayal, it was about creating something better than what had been taken. The courtroom fell silent as the judge prepared to announce the sentence. 6 months had passed since my hospital discharge, 5 since Tony's arrest, and now the criminal proceedings were concluding with this final act of justice. I sat in the gallery between Tracy and Jeremy, composed in a tailored navy suit that projected the quiet confidence I'd cultivated throughout the ordeal. Across the aisle, Edward Wallace slumped in his wheelchair, aged beyond his years by the stress of prosecution and the collapse of his financial empire. Beside him, a lone family member, not Cindy, who had been sequestered until after her testimony in her father's upcoming separate trial. Tony stood as directed, the prison jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame. He'd lost weight during his incarceration, his once perfect hair now cropped short, his polished charm replaced by a hollow-eyed resignation. Anthony Reynolds, the judge began, her voice steady and authoritative. You have been found guilty of attempted murder, multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. She reviewed the evidence, methodically, the dosage notebook documenting his poisoning efforts, the forged signatures on fraudulent loans, the elaborate financial shell game he'd constructed with the Wallaces, the testimonies from multiple victims. The calculated nature of your crimes, particularly the systematic poisoning of your wife while simultaneously emptying accounts you shared, demonstrates a disturbing level of premeditation and moral bankruptcy. The sentence, when delivered, was emphatic. 30 years without possibility of parole for 25, plus financial restitution to all victims. Tony remained expressionless, though his shoulders sagged visibly. He didn't look in my direction, hadn't made eye contact once throughout the proceedings. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered with cameras and microphones. I'd declined all interview requests, but had prepared a brief statement with Paul's guidance. Justice has been served today, not just for me, but for all of Anthony Reynolds' victims. I'm grateful to the investigators, prosecutors, and my support network for their tireless efforts. I'm now focused on moving forward, not looking back. Questions shouted as I walked to the waiting car, about Tony, about my feelings, about what came next. I left them unanswered, sliding into the back seat where Amelia waited with updates on our newest project. Perfect timing, she noted, checking her watch. We can still make the site meeting if traffic cooperates. I smiled at her deliberate focus on business, her understanding that immersion in meaningful work had become my most effective therapy. The contrast wasn't lost on me. While Tony faced decades in prison, I was reviewing architectural plans for an innovative community center my firm had been selected to design. While his future consisted of concrete walls and rigid routines, mine expanded with creative possibilities and earned success. That evening, I hosted a small gathering in my apartment. Not to celebrate Tony's sentencing, but to mark the launch of a foundation I'd established using part of my recovered assets. The Reynolds Recovery Foundation would provide resources to victims of financial abuse, particularly those trapped in relationships by economic control. Tracy raised her glass, in a toast, to turning pain into purpose. The view from my windows showcased the city lights coming alive against the darkening sky. Somewhere in that urban landscape, Tony began his first night of a 30-year sentence. I felt no joy in his suffering, no thirst for revenge satisfied by his downfall, only the quiet certainty that justice had been served, and the freedom to build something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. You've been through the unimaginable, yet emerged stronger. Would you share what that journey has taught you? The interviewer's question hung in the air as I gathered my thoughts. 1 year had passed since the hospital, since discovering Tony's betrayal. I rarely gave interviews, but had made an exception for this Financial Magazine's special issue on recovering from economic abuse. I learned that resilience isn't just about enduring hardship, I began carefully. It's about reclaiming agency when someone tries to take it from you. The journalist nodded encouragingly, recorder capturing my words. When my husband emptied our accounts while I was recovering from surgery, he believed he was taking everything. He didn't know about my separate finances, the safety net my mother had encouraged me to create years before. I touched my mother's locket, now a talisman I wore daily. That hidden fortune gave me breathing room, but it was just the beginning. True recovery came from recognizing that my value wasn't in what had been taken, but in what remained untouched: my capabilities, my relationships, my vision for the future. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, the city bustled with midday activity. My design firm had doubled in size since the divorce, with the Anderson project leading to industry, recognition I'd never anticipated. The most profound lesson, I continued, was learning to distinguish between loss and liberation. What initially felt like devastating loss, my marriage, our home, joint finances, gradually revealed itself as liberation from a relationship built on deception. The Reynolds Recovery Foundation had already assisted dozens of individuals trapped in financially abusive relationships, providing both emergency resources and long-term guidance toward independence. I've met so many people who stay in harmful situations because they believe they can't afford to leave. My message is that freedom has a value beyond financial calculation, and rebuilding is possible even when it seems everything has been taken. As the interview concluded, the journalist asked one final question. If you could speak directly to someone currently experiencing what you went through, what would you tell them? I considered carefully, wanting my words to offer genuine hope rather than empty platitudes. I would tell them that betrayal of trust is about the betrayer, not the betrayed. That their worth isn't diminished by someone else's deception. That rebuilding takes time, but creates something stronger than what was lost. I paused, then added what I wished someone had told me in those first devastating days. And I would tell them that the future holds possibilities they cannot yet imagine. Not just recovery, but renewal and reinvention. After the journalist left, I stood by the window watching the city below, reflecting on the journey from hospital bed to here. Not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Tony had emptied our accounts, not knowing about my hidden fortune. What he truly hadn't known was the fortune within me: resilience, determination, creativity, and the capacity to transform trauma into growth. The material assets he'd tried to steal were ultimately replaceable. The strength I'd discovered in myself was invaluable. The life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal was authentically, indisputably mine. While I was in hospital, my husband emptied our accounts. He didn't know about my hidden fortune, but the greatest fortune he overlooked wasn't in any bank, it was in me all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.